Chapter 892. The one who felt it the most was Jean Moubai, who was in the middle of the battle. It was said that the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker. But at this moment, the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker. Jean Moubai felt that the person standing in front of him was his supreme ruler. Not only was he ruling over his life, but he was also ruling over his entire soul. Not to mention resisting wholeheartedly. Even the slightest bit of rebellious thoughts would be a great disrespect in his heart. It would be a great betrayal to his conscience. His eyes were originally filled with an extreme ruthlessness, but at this moment, it had already vanished into thin air. What was left was an indescribable feeling of shock. There was not the slightest bit of strength left in his body, and the world-shaking profound energy contained in his meridians could not be used at all. The long sword that he had been holding tightly in his hand earlier was now difficult to hold, let alone brandishing it at will. There was actually such a tyrannical swordsmanship in this world, such a mystical technique. What kind of swordsmanship and technique is this? Jean Moubai watched as the sword light flashed and chopped down on his head. Even though he was in the middle of it all, he still had a sliver of consciousness. At this critical moment of life and death, he suddenly bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. A heart-wrenching pain suddenly assaulted him, and his consciousness actually returned to normal in an instant. In extreme haste, he suddenly raised the sword that was hanging low, and with an extremely hot and sharp sword aura, he met the attack head-on. Jean Moubai didn't have long to live, and Jun Moxie, who was aware of this, naturally didn't have the slightest bit of mercy, and even lost the thought of toying with this person. He wouldn't allow Jean Moubai to die from the backlash of the secret technique. Although Jean Moubai had to die, he must die by his own hands. The eyes of the usually calm Jun Moxie were a little red at this moment. He must personally chop off Jean Moubai's head, which was still breathing, in order to dispel the hatred in his heart, and to give justice to his beloved. This battle could be said to be Jun Dashao's most magnificent battle since his debut. Jun Moxie wanted to use his most violent means to completely destroy Jean Moubai in the shortest time possible. From there, he would be able to establish his great reputation as the evil monarch. With the birth of the evil prince, this was the first direct confrontation. He was facing a master of the Holy Emperor. With a crisp sound, the two swords finally clashed. Jun Moxie slashed down from the sky, while Jean Moubai counterattacked from ground. There was a loud bang, and a visible halo of light formed from the chi field. It continued to radiate outwards. Suddenly, the ground, which had sunk nearly 10 feet deep into the ground, was shaken and sent flying into the air. It was as if a hurricane had struck a wave of snow, sweeping up silver fragments that filled the universe. It was as if the entire space had been shattered in an instant. The ground in a radius of close to 40 zhang was instantly split apart, as if countless huge tree roots were propping up the ground. All of Jean Moubai's methods, including his flaming sun domain, were instantly shattered by the clash of the two. Such might cause the hearts of all the spectating experts to waver. They had long guessed that this evil monarch, Jun Moxie, would definitely be very strong. To be able to reach such a level of strength, how could he possibly not be able to withstand a single blow? But guessing was one thing, and personally witnessing it was another. Furthermore, no one had expected that this evil monarch who had appeared out of nowhere would actually be strong to such an extent. With the strength of a third-level Holy Emperor, he was actually able to suppress a fourth-level Holy Emperor and even gain the upper hand. Furthermore, he had an even more unfathomable and mysterious master behind his back. If the disciple was already like this, then the strength of the master could be imagined. Just how shocking would it be? In an instant, Cheng Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui's faces changed. With a light whistle, Jun Moxie borrowed the rebounding force of this clash to soar into the sky. Jean Moubai let out a muffled groan, and both his legs were almost completely buried into the ground. With a loud roar, The ground around him began to rumble and explode. And in the center of this explosion, Jean Mubai flew up, chasing after Jun Moxie in midair. In this clash, the treasured sword that Jean Mubai was using, a sword that had withstood hundreds of years of hardships, actually had a huge nick on it, almost breaking in half. This sword of Jean Mubai was extremely famous and could be said to be a legendary divine sword, battle soul sword. The quality of this sword was unique, and it was indestructible, capable of cutting through hair and cutting through metal like mud. Its sturdiness could be said to be the best in the continent. It could be said to be the #1 sword in the world. Jean Mubai had only managed to obtain this sword because of a stroke of luck. After obtaining this sword, he swept unhindered through the world, without a single defeat. It could even be said that the reason why he was able to achieve the illustrious reputation of a generation's holy emperor was largely due to this sword. But such a sword, under the attack of Jun Moxie's blood of yellow flame, had actually broken in half. Then, what kind of divine weapon was the sword in Jun Moxie's hands? But then again, if it wasn't for this legendary battle soul sword, how could ordinary weapons be able to defend against Jun Moxie's sure kill attack with the full power of blood of yellow flame? In the entire world, there were not many weapons that could do such a thing. For the battle soul sword to be able to survive, with only a small crack, it had already lived up to its illustrious reputation. At this moment, Jean Mubai no longer had the time to feel sorry for this divine sword. His eyes and heart were filled with only Jun Moxie, his greatest enemy. Although he was the one who had wronged Jun Moxie, and not the other way around, in his heart, Jun Moxie had to die. This evildoer who had committed the most heinous crimes. He was too despicable. Because of this evildoer, this old man's hundreds of years of clean reputation was completely destroyed. If I don't kill him, I am not a man. The sword light was like a swimming dragon, soaring into the heavens. But above the heavens, an even more brilliant sword light had already come crashing down. Jun Moxie borrowed the momentum to soar into the sky, and with a somersault, his head was below his feet. With both hands holding the sword, he shouted loudly, "Jean Mubai, die!" Jean Mubai laughed sinisterly, without any intention of dodging. His long sword pierced out quickly. At the same time, his left hand flipped out from his bosom once again. The silent palm wind, carrying a majestic destructive aura, struck towards Jun Moxie. It was almost the same as the last time, another sneak attack. Unfortunately, there was still a difference from the last time. The last time, Jun Moxie was completely unprepared and lacked the strength to resist. But now, not only did Jun Dashao possess astonishing strength, he had already paid attention to his every move. With a laugh, the sword light flashed, and with a twist, the brazen palm wind from Jean Mubai instantly dissipated into a ball of broken chi and was shattered into pieces by the blood of yellow flame. With a clang, the two long swords met again in midair. With a soft sound, Jean Mubai's battle soul sword was broken into two. The top half flew up with a snow-white sword light, letting out an unwilling cry. Jun Moxie's eyes flashed, and a mocking light flashed in them. With a spin of his feet, he accurately kicked the broken half of the sword. That broken half of the sword seemed to have a life of its own, and suddenly sped up and turned around, shooting towards Jean Mubai with a speed that was several times faster than before. It was as if the original owner of Jean Mubai was the culprit that caused him to be cut into two. Jean Mubai's sword was broken, and Jun Moxie's sword chi, along with his own sword chi, was crazily pushed back. For a moment, it was so unbearable that he wanted to vomit blood. At this moment, that broken half of the sword had already shot back. Its power was like thunder. He raised the broken half of the sword in his hand, and with a zhung sound, he had already struck the broken half of the sword away. But at the same time, Jun Moxie's long sword had already neared his body. The cold sword chi had already caused a layer of goosebumps to appear on Jean Mubai's body. At this moment, Jean Mubai did not care about his own life and death. Facing such a fatal blow, he was still able to maintain his composure. With a maniacal laugh, he threw the broken half of the sword in his hand out, and pierced it straight towards Jun Moxie's chest. At the same time, his body straightened in midair, and as if he had gone berserk, his hands and feet moved together, and he attacked wildly towards Jun Moxie. Every attack contained all the Xian energy in his body. He actually completely ignored the incoming fatal blow in front of him. Without a doubt, Zhang Mubai was fighting with his life on the line, and it was very obvious that he was fighting with all his might to perish together with his opponent. But in the next instant, Jun Moxie's entire body suddenly disappeared. And this process of disappearing was extremely short, only an instant. When he reappeared again, he was still at his original position. Even his posture did not change. But in that instant of disappearing, that broken sword had already passed by his original position, flying towards the endless void. This was another strange phenomenon that was hard to explain. It was as if that broken sword was not obstructed by Jun Moxie's body at all, and was just flying freely in the void. Cheng Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui looked at Xiao Ying at the same time. After all, she was the expert in this field. The art of concealment. Xiao Ying shook her head and said, although he has the art of concealment, but in a normal sense, the art of concealment is hard to see with the naked eye. But this technique of Jun Moxie's, it's clear that he's immune to attacks. I also don't understand. It's hard to understand. The shock on the two's faces grew even stronger. When they turned their heads again, they saw a fresh sword stained with fresh blood sticking out of Zhang Mubai's back. It was so eye-catching. It was unknown when, but Jun Moxie had already accurately stabbed that fatal sword into Zhang Mubai's heart. This sword had directly pierced through Zhang Mubai's heart. Zhang Mubai's body trembled, and a fierce light shone in his eyes. He completely ignored the sword that had pierced through his body, and his palms continued to strike fiercely at Jun Moxie's head. Jun Moxie laughed coldly and instantly retracted his sword. His body flashed to the side, dodging the attack. When his sword pierced through Zhang Mubai's heart, he did not directly activate the art of unlocking heaven's fortune to destroy Zhang Mubai's heart, because if he did that, it would be too easy on him. Although he had already decided to kill him, he still had some research on how to kill him. He absolutely could not let him off so easily. The sword flashed and suddenly disappeared. Jun Moxie abandoned his sword and used his palms instead. He roared, Zhang Mubai, prepare to repay your debt. His palms did not have any changes to speak of. They fell straight down, but their auras were magnificent. The strength of the palms was as heavy as a mountain, falling straight down from the sky. Zhang Mubai was naturally unwilling to sit and wait for death. He still wanted to try his luck. He forcefully raised his Xian Qi and brazenly struck out with his palms. However, when the four palms collided, Zhang Mubai let out a blood-curdling scream. He could not help but spit out a large amount of blood. On his body, the wound that had been sealed by Xian Qi burst open, and blood spurted out from the front and back of his body at the same time. He had hurriedly struck out with his palms. How could the difference between him and Jun Moxie's full strength be measured in terms of logic? Zhang Mubai's body was still falling, but he still continued to struggle. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and unwillingness. Jun Moxie did not hesitate. He followed closely behind. The power of his palms did not diminish in the slightest. He struck out with his palms in a frenzy. The sound of banging echoed continuously from the sky to the ground. In the beginning, it was still two parties colliding. Later on, it became a one-sided beating. The sound of bones breaking could be heard from the center of the dust-filled arena. The eyebrows of the onlookers twitched wildly. Just by listening to the sound, they could not tell how many bones in Zhang Mubai's body had been broken suddenly. A long howl was heard from the center of the arena. Jun Moxie, who was dressed in white, rose into the air. He rose 300 feet into the air. He laughed loudly. Zhang Mubai, when you come out to mingle, you have to repay your debts. This is the end of a despicable person like you. In his hand, there was a human body that looked like a dried salted fish. His entire body was limp. When Jun Moxie's hand trembled, his body swayed a few times in the air like a snake. It was Zhang Mubai. The Holy Emperor's life force was truly extraordinary. Even at this stage, Jean Mubai was still not dead. His eyes were still moving, filled with hatred. But at this moment, he was completely speechless. He could only stare fiercely at Jun Moxie, as if he wanted to use his venomous gaze to stare at Jun Moxie to death. Jun Moxie laughed heartily. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He laughed and said, "Today, I shall use the blood of the Holy Emperor as a sacrifice to my sword." The long sword slashed horizontally. The sword light was like lightning, flashing past. Jean Mubai's head flew up, spinning rapidly in the air. The blood of yellow flame let out a soft hum, as if it felt infinite satisfaction. As the head slowly fell down, Jun Moxie just happened to kick the Holy Emperor's head into powder. The powder scattered in the air like dust. Below, everyone from the 3 Holy Lands had a gloomy expression on their faces. Their eyes were wide open, and their teeth were gritted. Jun Moxie's actions were obviously a slap to the faces of everyone from the 3 Holy Lands. But they had no choice but to accept it. The 3 Guardians were watched by the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, so they definitely could not make a move. As for the others, they could make a move, but it would be for nothing. Wasn't water in their brains if they were to give themselves up for free? Jean Mubai's headless corpse fell from the air. Halfway down, a wisp of white smoke suddenly came out from his neck. Under the sunlight, it quickly turned into a small human figure. His entire body was only about a foot long, but he had hands, feet, a nose, and eyes. Shockingly, he was a Jean Mubai that had been shrunk by a dozen times. Spiritual seed. This was a special situation that would only appear when one's cultivation had reached the level of the Holy Emperor. Once the Holy Emperor died, he would form a spiritual seed. This spiritual seed was different from the nascent soul in the cultivation world. The so-called spiritual seed was an existence that had form but no substance. If the spiritual seed was lucky enough to escape, then it could find a family to reincarnate. It looked forward to making a comeback, and it could even retain the memories of its previous life. Most importantly, this kind of spiritual seed could not be destroyed with Xian Qi. Only the Holy Emperor who died under the Netherworld's death Qi could not produce a spiritual seed. For example, those who died under the hands of the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, the small figure swayed in the wind, and a look of panic appeared on his face. He quickly fell from the air, trying to escape. Jun Moxie exclaimed in surprise. To think that there's such an interesting thing. He casually waved his palm, intending to kill it, but he did not expect that it would only blow the little spiritual seed a little further away and did not cause any damage. The tiny figure glanced at Jun Moxie, his eyes filled with bone-piercing venomous hatred and undisguised contempt. Xiao Ying rushed out and quickly welcomed him. Her intention was to bring the spiritual seed back and then use a secret technique to take good care of it until she found a suitable family to let the spiritual seed reincarnate on its own. Then, the Holy Land would send someone to protect this family, and when the baby was born, he would be brought back to the Holy Land and carefully nurtured. After all, this kind of accidental death of the Holy Emperor's spiritual seed was very rare. If it was the Holy Emperor who had died of old age, this kind of spiritual seed would definitely not appear. Once such a person grew up, because he retained all the experiences and realms of his previous life, he would naturally be blessed by nature, and his growth speed would undoubtedly be unusually shocking. In just a few days, he would become an all-powerful, peerless expert. In fact, his achievements would be even greater than in his previous life. Seeing Xiao Ying's arrival, a trace of sincere joy appeared on the little figure's face. He felt that he had a backer to back him up, and he actually made a strange hand gesture at Jun Moxie. His illusory face was filled with hatred. Jun Moxie let out a strange laugh. How could he not recognize this gesture? It was a gesture that meant, just you wait. Obviously, Jean Mubai wanted Jun Moxie to wait for him, and he would definitely come back to take revenge. Jun Moxie laughed and said mockingly, "Do you think you still have the chance?" What a fool's dream. He flipped his right hand, and suddenly a cluster of black flames appeared on the tip of his finger. With a flick of his finger, the flames flew out with a swoosh. Before it could get close to the small figure was already imprisoned by a strange, mysterious force and automatically moved towards the black flames. At this time, Xiao Ying was less than 50 feet away from them. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the black flames moved as fast as lightning and came into contact with the body of the little man. The little man who had almost ignored Jun Mo Xie's powerful palm strike earlier had a look of extreme pain on his illusory face. The black flames had already started to burn from his two legs. It was neither fast nor slow, slow and graceful. As it burned, it descended quietly. All the elites present, including the 9 serenities and 14 masters, took a step back at the same time, their faces filled with genuine shock. That small cluster of black flames contained a sense of danger that even the 9 serenities and 14 masters felt a chill down their spines. What kind of flame was that? It could even cause damage to the almost indestructible spiritual seed. This matter had obviously exceeded everyone's understanding. Xiao Ying suddenly stopped and shouted angrily, "Jun Moxie, what do you mean by this? Zhan Mubai is already dead. You still refuse to let him go, and even want to destroy the spiritual seed he left behind?" Jun Moxie said lightly, "Is Holy Emperor Zhan really dead?" "Not necessarily. Didn't you see that child gesturing for me to wait for him? I don't have the patience to wait for him for 1,000 years. I might as well just finish him off in one go. It'll save me a lot of trouble." Xiao Ying was so angry that she couldn't speak. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and her face turned red. She gritted her teeth and said, "Jun Moxie, your methods are too vicious. You won't even let go of a spiritual seed. What's the difference between this and killing a baby with your own hands? You are simply inhumane. Baby? Do you think that's an ordinary baby? Don't you know that when this baby, who clearly remembers everything that happened today, grows up in the future, if he hides in the dark, how many people of my Jun family will die in his hands?" Jun Mo Xie smiled mockingly and deliberately emphasized the word baby. Then he said in a calm and unruffled manner, "His life is more precious compared to the lives of many people in my family. If it were you, how would you choose? Not to mention that in my eyes, he is not even comparable to a dog of my Jun family." He smiled at Xiao Ying and said, "Beauty, those who are my enemies, even if they die, I can pull them out and kill them again. Didn't I say it openly just now? Do you believe me now?" It was so infuriating that Xiao Ying's whole body began to tremble. The black flame in the air burned very quickly. In just a short moment, before it fell to the ground, the little spiritual seed had already been completely burned. Not even a speck of dust or ashes was left. Zhan Mubai, a generation's holy emperor, with hundreds of years of cultivation, was destroyed just like that, forever disappearing from this world. The black flame fell to the ground, but it did not extinguish, continuing to burn slowly but elegantly. Although it was only a small amount, it seemed as if it could burn to the ends of the world. The soil that it touched also began to burn slowly. Jun Moxie's hand trembled, and that terrifying black flame instantly returned to his fingertips. With another flip, it disappeared. A series of panting sounds rang out from the opposite side. The remaining 10 or so people from the 3 holy lands had bloodshot eyes, their faces full of hatred. Suddenly, they roared in unison and rushed over. "Kill this demon. This brat is insane and inhumane. Kill him. Kill him. Take revenge for Holy Emperor Zhan. Take revenge for our brothers." Chu Wu Hui shouted. "All of you stop." Chu Wu Hui's voice reverberated through the surroundings. But right now, everyone had already descended into a frenzy, and no one listened to his orders. Jun Moxie's face suddenly turned as cold as ice. With a cold chuckle, he said, "Revenge? Come at me together. This young master does not mind at all. Welcome, a big welcome." With a flip of his palm, he roared, "Fall for this daddy." With a loud rumble, a huge pit suddenly appeared within a radius of 60 zhang. Or rather, it should be said that it was a bottomless pit. The experts who had just started, including the two holy emperors, were all caught off guard and fell into the pit. Jun Moxie laughed maniacally, an extremely cruel expression on his face. With a wave of his right hand, that abnormally terrifying black flame appeared once again. Just now, it was only a small portion of the spirit seed. But now, a black flame that covered an area of almost 20 zhang had appeared. Jun Moxie's eyes narrowed, and he shouted coldly, "Go!" The black flame flew out with a swoosh, and with a loud bang, it exploded into tiny black flames. Small wisps of black flames covered the entire sky above the pit, slowly descending. It was as if the heavens had a wide net, not letting anyone through. "Stop! Quickly stop!" Cheng Yin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui roared at the same time and flew over. But Jun Moxie was like the experts of the three holy lands, completely ignoring them. Ever since he had personally said, "Start the battle with the living and end it with the dead," he had never thought of letting these people off. Now that there was such a heaven-sent opportunity, how could he be willing to stop? If their positions were switched and the ones being slaughtered were themselves, would Zhang Mubai and the rest stop if someone shouted for them stop? The answer was obvious to everyone. That would be an extremely laughable matter. Being soft-hearted to one's enemies was the greatest cruelty to one's self and one's family. Jun Moxie felt that he would never do such a brainless thing that would cause pain to his loved ones and delight to his enemies. Miserable screams rang out one after another. Those were screams that pierced through one's soul. If one did not hear it with their own ears, no one would be able to imagine what kind of torture these people in the pit were enduring right now. Such a small pit, even though it seemed to be bottomless, how deep could it really be? Could it really trap a saint and the Holy Emperor? But after waiting for a long time, not a single person was able to come up. The experts in the pit were truly unlucky. The reason why they had charged up and ignored Chu Wu Hui's orders was because they were enraged by the destruction of Zhang Mubai's body and soul. Secondly, they had seen the power of the black flames burning Zhang Mubai's spirit seed. There was a trace of fear in their hearts. If someone like Jun Moxie was allowed to live, no one would be able to feel at ease. To be able to destroy even a spirit seed, this kind of person was simply too terrifying. This was equivalent to destroying their future after death. This kind of person definitely could not be allowed to live. So they all chose to take action at the same time. They had to get rid of this future trouble. Right now, Jun Moxie had just finished a huge battle, and his Xianxi had already been depleted by more than half. Right now, he was extremely close to the three Holy Lands camp, but far from his own team. This was truly a heaven-sent opportunity. Everyone charged forward together. All of them were high-level saints, and there were even two experts from the Holy Emperor. Such a formation would definitely be able to kill Jun Moxie the moment they came into contact. So they all charged forward like a swarm of bees. But they had never imagined that Jun Moxie's strength had already reached such a terrifying level. With just a lift of his hand, a huge pit appeared in the ground. And the amount of black flames he could control was not just that little bit. He could actually create so much. Ever since the black flames sealed the sky, all the experts have been striking out with their palms, trying to extinguish these floating flames. Even if they could knock them away, it would be good. But what they did not expect was, no matter how much strength they used, it had no effect on these black flames at all. They could only watch as they slowly and elegantly descended. As they descended, the space between the flames became smaller and smaller. Originally, not even a single person could get out. Now, not even half a body could get out. Finally, one of the saint experts could not hold on any longer. With a swoosh, he took off his robe and charged forward. Everyone's spirits were lifted. They stared at this person who dared to be the first to charge forward. As long as he was lucky enough to get out, then everyone else would be able to do the same. Even if he could not get out, if he could disperse the black flames, he would still be a worthy sacrifice. But their hope was like a soap bubble, bursting rapidly. The moment that Saint came into contact with the black flames, the robe he was waving was instantly pierced through by the black flames. Then it landed on his body unhurriedly. Then this saint, who had been stabbed by swords and knives, and who had not even let out a groan after using all the tortures in the world, immediately screamed in agony. He rolled around on the ground, screaming in agony. His body twitched and twisted. But no matter how he rolled, the black flames on his body remained the same, and continued to burn unhurriedly. As he rolled, the black flames on his body also accidentally touched the bodies of others. Then, those who were not lucky suddenly screamed in agony, rolling on the ground. The black flames were like a plague, burning on their bodies. As they rolled, it caused even more people to be touched by the black flames. That trend was like a rolling snowball, getting bigger and bigger as it rolled, and the area affected also became bigger and bigger. And in the air, there were still countless black flames, like black snowflakes, slowly and elegantly falling down. Hai Wuya and He Jiqiu, who were lucky enough not to be touched by the black flames, looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Suddenly, He Jiqiu had a flash of inspiration. He shouted, dig a hole, and get out from the other side." Hai Wuya immediately came to his senses. The two holy emperors had joined forces to attack, and at this moment, who knew how much of their Jinchi had been used? With a loud bang, they immediately dug a hole that was more than 10 zhang long in front of them. The two of them did not even try to be modest, and with a bend of their waists, they fought to be the first to enter the hole behind him. Another 2 4th-level saints followed. As for the others, their bodies were all covered in black flames, and they were all screaming and wailing in pain. A saint whose body was on fire screamed madly, suddenly discovering this hole. His face was already half burnt, but he still rushed towards the hole with all his might, only to be sent flying by He Jiqiu's palm, fiercely. The ground rumbled, and dust flew everywhere. He Jiqiu, Hai Wuya, and the other 2 saints jumped out, their faces covered in dust, their eyes lifeless. 9 serenities and 14 masters and the rest had already gathered at the edge of the hole to watch, and clearly saw the scene of the saint whose body was on fire being slapped away by He Jiqiu. At this moment, they turned their heads to look at the 4 people, their expressions all filled with disdain. No matter what the reason was, those who attacked their comrades in times of danger would always be the target of everyone's disdain. The scene in the hole at this moment caused everyone to shiver in fear. One by one, the experts with powerful Xian cultivation were all inside, and most of them only had half of their bodies left. But they were still wriggling, screaming, and burning. Xiao Ying's face was deathly pale, and she suddenly stomped her feet as if she had gone mad. Large amounts of soil poured into the hole like a mountain torrent. She could not bear to see everything in front of her, and decided to bury these people to prevent them from suffering, so that they could just die. But something even more bizarre happened. The soil and rocks that were slanting downwards instantly filled up the entire cave. However, it was only for a short moment before it slowly sank downwards. It didn't take long before it disappeared without a trace. Countless black flames once again appeared in the cave, slowly and elegantly burning. This time, the soil was actually burned completely in an instant. There was no longer anyone screaming inside, and all the bodies were only left with pieces. It looked like they were about to finish burning. The 4 people turned at the same time and looked at Jun Moxie with shock, fear, and disbelief. Jun Moxie stood there calmly, smiling faintly, his white robe fluttering, handsome and tall, like a jade tree in the wind. What a good young master, a handsome young man. But now, the 4 experts looked at him as if they were looking at a demon. Even the world's #1 madman, 9 serenities and 14 masters, was no exception. This guy, was he a human or a demon? Jun Moxie smiled faintly and suddenly stretched out his hand, pointing at the 4 survivors, and said softly, "The 3 holy lands, you better not provoke me anymore. My patience is really limited. You can't bear the consequences." He smiled gently, shook his head, and sighed softly. He bemoaned the state of the universe and pitied the fate of mankind. "Ha ha, I didn't want to kill the last few people. but I'm a person who is afraid of trouble. If I stop and don't kill, would you all think that I'm very soft-hearted? Would something like this happen again in the future? In order to avoid trouble, I can only prove it to you all. Don't ever think that I, Jun Moxie, am easy to bully. In fact, killing you all is like slaughtering chickens and dogs. Complete silence. Now, no one doubted Jun Moxie's words anymore, especially the 4 people who had just come out of the hole. There was only fear in their eyes when they looked at Jun Moxie. That hellish scene, even if they died, they did not want to experience it a second time. It was really too scary. Their courage was broken, and their hearts were cold. Even the 3 guardians looked at Jun Moxie with some indescribable feelings. Good, Jun Moxie. You are really arrogant. Clapping sounds rang out. 9 serenities and 14 masters slowly clapped, looking at Jun Moxie with smiling eyes, and said cautiously, I have to say, although you are still young, you are already qualified to be our opponent. With this kind of magical flame of yours, if we are careless and get tricked by you, I am afraid even this young master will not be able to escape. In the hands of 9 serenities and 14 masters, there was a sword that belonged to an unknown person. On the tip of the sword, there was a black flame dancing, and the body of the sword was slowly burning. It did not melt, but only burned bit by bit, and the places that were burned turned into nothingness. This chapter took up an entire night, more than 10 hours, plus a day of revision. I feel that I have written it very smoothly. 3 chapters, 9,000 words. If brothers and sisters think that this is a breakthrough, please cast a monthly vote. If brothers and sisters think that this is a breakthrough, please cast a monthly vote. Thank you. The continuous single chapters have no effect. I am very disappointed. Perhaps what I have written can no longer arouse your passion and blood. I am sorry, please don't scold me, but I have really tried my best. Starting from tomorrow, I will enter the Misty Mansion and start a new plot. I really hope that brothers and sisters can give me the motivation. I really need the monthly votes in your hands. This is true. Asking for monthly votes for this chapter and for the real rise of the evil prince. Chapter 893. With a flick of his hand, the 14th young master stabbed the sword into the ground. The black flames sank into the soil, but it immediately burned through the soil, continuing to burn upwards. It really can burn anything. The 9 serenities and 14 masters sighed. This young master is truly shocked. Jun Moxie chuckled and said modestly, This is just a small trick. I've let everyone see a joke. I'm ashamed. Everyone's mouths twitched. This kind of unimaginable skill, and you still say it's a small trick? Then wouldn't your great skill be able to burn the heavens and destroy the world? If Jun Moxie had enough spirit energy to support it, even if he used the flame of primal chaos to burn the heavens, or even the entire world, that was not something impossible or strange. Young Master Jun's self-proclaimed title of Evil Monarch is truly worthy of the word evil. His methods are truly evil, vicious, and sinister. But Chingyin Shao looked at Jun Moxie coldly and said, For today's matter, you have to give the 3 of us an explanation for massacring the people of our holy lands. Explanation? What explanation? What kind of explanation do I have to give you? Jun Moxie smiled strangely. You 4 experts came here to act as arbitrators, but did this young master beg you to do so? You are seniors and experts, and if you want to be the arbiter, this young master will turn a blind eye to it out of respect for the elderly. However, this arbiter should at least have a fair and just attitude, right? I wonder if I'm wrong about this. Of course, arbitrators should naturally do what arbitrators should do. Fairness and justice is what we have always pursued as arbitrators. The 9 serenities and 14 masters said in a sanctimonious manner, although his eerie voice did not match the word sanctimonious at all. Since Senior 14th Young Master has said so, this young master will say it directly. Just now, Senior Chung wanted an explanation for me? I don't know what kind of explanation I should give. Instead, I want to ask Senior Chung, or perhaps all the seniors of Heaven Saint Palace. Jun Moxie said with grief and indignation. Just now, under the watchful eyes of the 4 arbitrators, a group of people besieged me. Moreover, it was after the arbiter announced the end of the duel. This fact made me speechless. Did the words of the arbiter still have any power? If it was the 14th young master who announced the results just now, then it would be fine. But I remember that it was you who announced the results, Senior Chu, right? What role did you arbiters play? Chengyin Xiao and the other 2 were momentarily speechless. The truth was right in front of their eyes, and with their status, they were not willing to speak against their conscience. You're spouting nonsense. Surprisingly, it was 9 serenities and 14 masters who spoke up to help resolve the situation. He said sternly, why didn't he take up the responsibility of arbitration? Didn't he speak out to stop them just now? As he said this, he chuckled in schadenfreude. When Chengyin Xiao and the other 2 heard 9 serenities and 14 masters speak up for them, they thought that this madman had become a good person today. If he spoke up for them, it would be much better than them trying to quibble. But when they listened carefully, was he really helping them resolve the situation? This was simply adding oil to the fire, beating a dog when it was down. Just now, it was this junior's slip of the tongue. Senior 14th young master's words are reasonable. When they charged over, this junior clearly heard the voices of the 2 seniors to stop them, and it wasn't just one shout. Jun Moxie apologized, and then with an expression that was even more wrong than Do Yi's, he said in a sonorous voice, but this junior doesn't understand. Even if we don't talk about the 3 seniors' status as arbitrators, just the status of the 3 guardians in the Holy Lands isn't enough to deter them at all. Looking at the current situation, the 3 guardians' orders are actually like a fart to the people of the Holy Lands, and they don't care at all. I'm really shocked. Oh, this junior was too agitated just now, and had no intention of profaning the 3 of you. I hope you can understand. The 3 of them instantly turned red. The 3 of them and the 14 people were the arbitrators, but the battle had ended. One party had ganged up on the other party, and the other party was alone. This kind of bad luck couldn't be justified no matter where it was, especially when the 3 of them were the most respected people in the 3 Holy Lands, and the people below them didn't care about them at all. It was really a great loss of face for them. This slap from Jun Moxie caused the 3 of them to feel a piercing pain in their hearts. Their faces turned red, but they could only endure it. The 3 of them couldn't help but glare fiercely at the 2 lucky survivors, Hai Wuye and He Jiqiu, their gazes extremely unfriendly. 9 serenities and 14 masters Lang Lang said, these words are not nonsense. Speaking of an explanation, this young master also wants an explanation. This young master is also one of the arbitrators. Just like what that June brat said, this kind of vile thing actually happened right under this young master's eyes. Whether or not those juniors treat your words as fart, this young master doesn't care. But this kind of action is clearly not putting this young master in their eyes at all. This matter, to this young master, can be said to have seriously damaged this young master's reputation. This matter definitely cannot be left unsettled like this. Even if that June brat doesn't pursue this matter, this young master will still pursue this matter. The 3 of them had a bitter expression on their faces. Just now, they were only thinking about that brat Jun Moxie. How could they have forgotten about this matter? What should they do now? This lunatic can't be judged with common sense. Especially this time, they weren't in the right. This is troublesome, Jun Moxie continued. That's right. Even if we don't talk about 14th young master's face and reputation, there's still the problem of this young master's safety. The 3 guardians wanted an explanation from me, and this young master expressed his understanding. After all, so many people had died. But at that time, they had already pounced on me. If this young master didn't retaliate, I'm afraid they would have torn me to pieces in an instant. Could it be that, in your hearts, I should just wait for death to come? The 2 of them echoed each other like this, pressing forward step by step, causing the faces of the 3 guardians to turn the color of pig liver. Jun Moxie pursed his lips. Or perhaps, in the minds of the 3 guardians, only the Holy Lands are allowed to win or lose, but I'm not allowed to retaliate at all. Your sneak attack and encirclement caused the deaths of many people, and you still want to seek justice from those who narrowly escaped death? Isn't this a bit too much of a joke? Guardians, could it be that your Heaven Saint Palace is such a sore loser? 3 seniors. Think about it. Isn't this logical? As he said this, Jun Moxie spread his hands. Numerous black flames suddenly jumped up from the ground, slowly merging into a ball and returning to Jun Moxie's palms. With a flip of his palms, they disappeared. The word sore loser had just come out of Chu Wu Hui's mouth to criticize He Jiqiu. Right now, Jun Moxie's words were being used on the 3 of them. You brat bullshit. How are we sore losers? Chang'in Xiao roared angrily. The 3 guardians were extremely furious, but they had no way to refute, because they were the ones in the wrong, and the encirclement had just ended. If it wasn't sore losers, then what else could it be? Feeling extremely stifled, Chu Wu Hui turned to Hai Wu Ya and the others and hollered, "Despicable things! What are you waiting for? Scram? Even if you want to scram, you have to give this young master an explanation first." 9 serenities and 14 masters Ling snorted coldly. "Before I say anything, I want to see which one of you dares to scram." Chang'in Xiao forcefully suppressed his anger. After taking 2 deep breaths, he said with great difficulty, "This matter is our side's fault. I hope 14th brother can forgive us. A great person is magnanimous, and let this matter go. Don't make things difficult for these juniors anymore." His entire group was slaughtered cleanly, and he couldn't even ask for an explanation. Instead, he was forced to apologize to someone else. The humiliation and grievance in Cheng Yin Zhao's heart could be imagined. If it really was Jun Moxie's fault, then Cheng Yin Xiao and the other 2 would rather fight to the death with the 9 serenities and 14 masters. They would definitely not let Jun Moxie off. But the cause of this matter was truly caused by the Holy Lands. Their methods were indeed a little despicable. A large group of people ganging up on a child who wasn't even 20 years old. This was indeed a little unpleasant to hear. Who would have thought that not only did the 4 of them lose face, the majority of their people had also died, and the initiative had even been handed over to the enemy. What was this called? Even if you guys don't want face, we still do. F***CK. Where do we still have face now? We can't even get it back anymore. Chang'in Xiao and Chu Wu Hui gritted their teeth and swore in their hearts. When we return to the Holy Lands, we definitely won't let a single one of these fellows off. We definitely have to teach them a good lesson. Oh, since Brother Cheng has personally apologized, this young master has always been magnanimous. Since that's the case, I'll let it go this time. 9 serenities and 14 masters said magnanimously, "You guys can scram now." Slightly further away, Hai Wu Ya and He Jiqiu's eyes were practically spitting fire. But under the stern gazes of Chu Wu Hui and Chang'in Xiao, they did not say a single word and turned to leave. Not long later, their figures had already disappeared. Only Xiao Ying did not participate in the argument. She only stared blankly at the empty space. A total of 30 top-notch experts. They had paid such a huge price and lost so much face to protect these people. But in the blink of an eye, all of them had died here. These people were all the battle strength of the war for seizing the heavens. So many had suddenly died. The impact on the war for seizing the heavens was definitely significant, enough to affect the overall situation. If there were no reinforcements, with the current strength of the Holy Lands, they would definitely lose this war for seizing the heavens. This matter ends here, Chu Wu Hui said decisively. Jun Moxie, you won the exquisite lotus. Are you going to follow us to get it? Or are you going to wait for us to send someone to send it to the Tian Fa forest? Chapter 894. Wait for them to send it to the Tian Fa forest? There were too many variables. With just a random reason, they would be able to deny the exquisite lotus. Right now, Jun Moxie did not dare to believe the noble character of the Holy Lands at all. Why would they wait for them to send it over? Even if they did not play any tricks, if it dragged on for 3 to 5 years, it would be enough to make people anxious. As for going to the Heaven Saint Palace to retrieve it, This choice was equally difficult. Right now, it was nice to say that you won the battle and would naturally be able to obtain the bet. But if he went to the Heaven Saint Palace, so what if these fellows turned their backs on him? Who knew how many undying old fools were waiting for him in that mysterious place? What kind of strange tricks would they have up their sleeves? This was not the first time the three Holy Lands turned their backs on someone. Jun Moxie had never dared to trust the credibility of these people. Although Jun Moxie was conceited, he was not arrogant to the point of thinking that he could go against the entire Heaven Saint Palace with his own strength. It was the same even after his strength had increased. Since we've already won, could it be that we don't want the bet? The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters said sinisterly. Jun Brat, you don't need to hesitate so much. This young master is the judge of this battle. I will naturally accompany you to the Heaven Saint Palace to retrieve the exquisite lotus and end this bet. This young master wants to see if they dare to refuse. He had been watching coldly from the side. Although Chu Wu Hui's words seemed to be fair on the surface, there was actually a hidden meaning behind it. In his heart, he was somewhat angered. Furthermore, Jun Moxie was the descendant of an old friend. Thus, he had stepped forward and interfered. With his current position, it was completely justifiable for him to interfere. Jun Moxie was extremely touched. This junior appreciates senior 14th young master's kind intentions. But with your identity, if you go to the Heaven Saint Palace, I'm afraid it will still be a little awkward. The 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had always been the greatest enemy of the Heaven Saint Palace. If he went, wouldn't it be awkward? Even if the Heaven Saint Palace were to use all of their strength, they would still want to keep this madman here forever. Jun Moxie had never been one to owe anyone favors. How could he allow the 9 Serenities and 14 Masters to take such a risk for him? Fine, you decide for yourself. If this young master goes, it will indeed be somewhat inconvenient. The 9 Nether 14th young master understood his meaning and did not insist. However, according to my personal experience, with the reputation of the Heaven Saint Palace, they might not go back on their word and renege on the bet of a child like you. Jun Moxie nodded with a smile and said to Chu Wu Hui, since Senior 14th young master has said so, I will follow you to Heaven Saint Palace. Chu Wu Hui raised his thumb and said, good. How courageous. Good man. Jun Moxie chuckled in his heart. I only have absolute confidence that I can escape unscathed. It's not that I have the guts to do that, and I definitely won't use my life to bet on you keeping your promise, returning to the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team. He said to Mei Shuyin, Shuiyin, I'm going to retrieve the exquisite lotus, and then I have some other things to do. You've left Tian Fa for long enough. You should go back to take a look. I'll leave you to lead the way back. Then you must be careful. Mei Shuiyin looked at him with concern. Don't worry, don't you know me? As long as I want to escape. Who can catch me? Jun Moxie said in a low voice, winking at her. Mei Shuiyin thought of that mysterious pagoda of his and couldn't help but relax. She nodded with a smile. When you go back this time, you must make good use of the time to increase the strength of your family. As for the 2 pieces of spirit vein I gave you, just use the method I used earlier to scrape off a pinch of powder and drink it with water. Although that is not the golden jade fluid, it is still the essence of the spirit stone immortal milk. Remember not to take too much of it. If you take too much, it will be very dangerous. Jun Moxie said, understood, I will take note. Also, after you go back, quickly raise the strength of grandfather and 3rd uncle. You must be ahead of everyone else in this aspect. You must ensure that grandfather and 3rd uncle are the strongest people in the Jun family apart from you and me. As for the pills, you can distribute them as you see fit. And I understand. Mei Shuiyin nodded her head seriously. She understood Jun Moxie's actions very well. Jun Tian and Jun Wui's current strength was undoubtedly very strong in the secular world. But in Tian Fa, they were the weakest, and they were the most important people in the Jun family. If they maintained this situation for a long time, even with Jun Moxie suppressing them, it would not be a long-term solution. So, the most important thing right now was to raise the strength of Jun Tian and Jun Wui. Even if they did not have enough strength, this increase would certainly increase their lifespan by a considerable amount. To be honest, I really miss Xiao Yi, Qin Han, and Mother. Mei Shuiyan's face turned red as she said in a low voice. Don't worry, in terms of prestige, you are higher than me in our June family. When you go back this time, they will definitely pester you to the point of annoyance. Let's see if you still miss them then. June Moxie revealed a strange smile. These words were not baseless. They were the truth. Ever since Mei Shui Yan had sacrificed herself to save them, everyone in the June family had wholeheartedly accepted this future young mistress. Mei Shuiyan's popularity in the June family had definitely reached a terrifying level, where everyone was united as one after the arrangements were made. June Moxie was about to turn around when he saw Bailey Luo Yun slowly walking over. Bailey Luo Yun opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. Looking at the shy expression on this great assassin's face, June Moxie asked, Luo Yun, what's the matter? It's like this, young master. This time I want to stay in Chrysanthemum City for a few more days to deal with private matters. So I'm asking, young master. Bailey Luo Yun stuttered. This brat saw his old lover. He's moved. On the side, Lung Ao laughed strangely. Bailey Luo Yun's face instantly turned red. Wow, really? June Moxie exclaimed in surprise, then suddenly hooked his arm around Bailey Luo Yun's neck, acting like a good brother, and began to gossip. This is a good thing. What's the specific situation? What's her name? What does she look like? Is she fat or thin? Is she tall or short? Which family is she from? How much does she weigh? What's her 3 measurements? Do you have any nude photos? Bailey Luo Yun was instantly battered and exhausted. He begged for mercy. Young master, please spare me. Her name is Zhan Meng Dai. Someone from the Zhan family? June Moxie frowned slightly. He suddenly remembered that when he changed his name to Dongfang Dashu, he seemed to have met this girl once. She was a very beautiful and outstanding beauty. However, he had just killed the Zhan family's old ancestor, and Bailey Luo Yun actually had a partner from the Zhan family. Although he didn't mind the other party, please rest assured, young master, I know what to do. Bailey Luo Yun's originally awkward handsome face showed a trace of pain. I will tell her the truth clearly. If she chooses her family and becomes enemies with young master, I will not force her, and we will become strangers. But if she chooses me, beads of sweat dripped down Bailey Luo Yun's face. He used a lot of strength and said in a low voice, if she chooses me in the end, please, young master, grant her wish. Don't worry, 100 years of cultivation will cross the same boat. 1,000 years of cultivation will sleep together. If she is your wife, she will definitely be your wife. Although Zhan Mubai is the Zhan family's old ancestor, he is someone from hundreds of years ago. Zhan Meng Dai might not have any feelings for him, right? June Moxie patted Bailey Luo Yun's shoulder and encouraged him. Luo Yun, where there's a will, there's a way. Go and fight for it. Things might not be as serious as you think. Wives were meant to be snatched. Who cares if she is willing or not? Let's cook the rice for her first. Let's see where she can run to with that belly of hers. If it wasn't for the fact that I can't beat her and can't bear to use force, I might have already. Suddenly, he felt a pain in his ear. It was Mei Shuiyan who had pinched his ear with a jade hand. She leaned in with a red face and asked in a dangerous voice, You what? What do you mean you can't beat her and have to use force? June Moxie begged for mercy and said with a grimace, What I mean is, I've already. His eyes rolled a few times, and he suddenly had an idea. I've already liked you for a long time, but you're so powerful, so I didn't dare to confess, afraid that you would hit me. Aren't you very touched? He laughed dryly. Everyone burst into laughter, and Bailey Luo Yun felt much better in his heart as he laughed. Luo Yun, you go. We all support you. Don't be overcautious. You have to grasp your own happiness. Mei Shuiyan said gently. Thank you, young madam, Bailey Luo Yun said gratefully. This young madam caused Mei Shuiyan's face to turn red and June Mo Xie's heart to burst with joy. Why don't you bring a few more people along? Let Lung Ao accompany you. Then choose a small team of Heaven Destroyer members. June Moxie said domineeringly, whoever dares to snatch your wife, just beat them to death or cripple them. Everyone was sweating profusely. This young master was the classic posture of a bandit who wanted to snatch the bride. The legendary #1 hedonistic young master actually lived up to his name. After settling these matters, everyone discussed some other matters. Finally, everything was settled. June Moxie watched as Mei Shuiyin brought her people and left like a dark cloud. On the other side, Bailey Luo Yin also brought a few people and headed in the opposite direction, entering the city. The battlefield that was filled with blood and fire just a moment ago was now completely silent and empty. June Moxie turned around and saw 9 serenities and 14 masters standing there with his hands behind his back. Xiao Ying and Cheng Yin Xiao were watching from the side, while Chu Wu Hui was squatting on the ground with a sullen look on his face. He was using his sword to dig the soil, as if he was looking for something. "What are you doing?" June Mo. Xie asked in astonishment as he looked at the 20 or 30 earthworms that had been dug out. They were still squirming. Hearing his question, Chu Wu Hui's face turned red, but he did not say a word. He gritted his teeth and continued to dig. His face was filled with an expression that seemed like he wanted to cry, but had no tears. Even if his asterisk shoal was raped by 100 Xian beasts, it should not make this guardian have such an expression. June Moxie's heart was filled with bewilderment. Apologize. I forgot about one thing. Yesterday, I said I would go to the Misty Mansion today. It seems like I can't do it because there's still a bet. I still have to get the exquisite lotus today. I've written more than 7,000 words, so I won't be posting all of them. Let me save some. What if I'm drunk by some unscrupulous deity and can't write anymore? Brothers, don't you think so? This brother's alcohol tolerance seems to be very dangerous. Yesterday, that fellow asked me when I was going so that he could wait for me. I asked, "What are you waiting for me for? Are you waiting for me to make you wish you were dead?" In the end, that perverted fellow jumped 3 feet high and said in surprise, "You really want to rape my asterisk shoal? Then I have to prepare to wash myself properly." Chapter 895. Your battle has come to an end, but our bet has yet to be completed. And it's a bet we made in the 5-man battle formation just now. The loser has to dig out 1,000 earthworms without using Xian Qi. He lost the bet. That's how it is, and he's fulfilling the bet now. 9 serenities and 14 masters explained patiently. The bet is to dig earthworms. Although it's a little awkward to dig earthworms without using Xian Qi, but the soil here is very fertile, and with the huge commotion just now, all the earthworms must have been alarmed. I believe that even digging out 1,000 earthworms is not a difficult task. Why is he so worried? If Xiao Ying is a woman, it's understandable that she's afraid and disgusted, but why is a man like Chu Wu Hui so worried? June Moxie found it funny, but was also puzzled. This is something you don't know again. In the 3rd round of the 7-man battle formation, we made another bet. Whoever lost the bet would have to eat these 1,000 earthworms. Unfortunately, he lost the bet again. He originally had a chance to win, and I generously gave him the first choice. 9 serenities and 14 masters used a proud tone to explain his results. June Moxie laughed loudly. Then, Senior Chu is really too unlucky. Serves you right. Who asked you to have no confidence in me? You bet on my enemy. It would be strange if you didn't lose. Chu Wu Hui groaned in ecstasy and rolled his eyes. He did not say anything and continued to dig the earth, sweating profusely. Earthworms. I want the black earthworms, not the red ones. Yes, the most disgusting kind. 9 serenities and 14 masters was at the side, supervising strictly and meticulously on the ground. More and more earthworms appeared. A large group of them were entangled together, occasionally sticking out their heads and tails, wriggling slowly. June Moxie suddenly remembered that these things are going to be swallowed by Chu Wu Hui later. He could not help but retch. His face instantly turned pale. That scene was too terrifying. It seemed that the soil here was very fertile. Despite the many requests of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, they managed to dig up 1,000 black, disgusting worms in just one night. After finishing his work, Chu Wu Hui's face was ashen. Covered in mud, he crawled out of the pit, a look of despair on his face. With his last shred of hope, he begged, "Brother 14th." A fawning smile appeared on Chu Wu Hui's face. Standing in front of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, he looked extremely pitiful. There was not a single trace of the aura of a peak expert in the world. "What?" 9 serenities and 14 masters asked arrogantly with her nose in the air. "Brother 14th, look, I dug up 1,000 earthworms. I'm not trying to act shamelessly." A fawning voice said, "If you don't want to go back on your word, then hurry up and eat. Close your eyes, stop breathing through your nose, and it'll be over soon," someone said in a gloomy voice. I don't have a good appetite recently. Can I not eat?" He smiled fawningly. "No. If you're willing to bet, then you have to be willing to admit your loss. You don't go too far." Chu Wu Hui was enraged. "How am I going too far?" As expected of a peerless expert from the Holy Lands, to be able to say such things. "If you say I'm going too far, then I'm going too far. What about it? You lost the bet. Are you trying to act shamelessly?" 9 serenities and 14 masters snorted. "I'm not trying to act shamelessly. Didn't I dig up 1,000 earthworms? They were all black earthworms according to your instructions," Chu Wu Hui said with a red face and neck. But then he lowered his voice and grabbed 9 serenities and 14 masters' arm and shook it. "Brother 14th." His voice was soft and gentle, like a girl whining to her lover. At the side, Jun Moxie actually shivered. Even Jun Dashao's calm and collected self seemed to be unable to withstand it. On the other side, Xiao Ying and Qing Yin Zhao's hair also stood on end. Even with their 1,000 years of cultivation, they were unable to resist. "Even if you call me 14th master, it's useless. If you're willing to bet, you have to accept your loss. Even if the heavens break, you still have to eat it. Not a single one can be missing." Although Chu Wu Hui's intentions were soft and gentle, 9 serenities and 14 masters' heart was like steel, unwavering. You're trying to kill me, ah?" Chu Wu Hui stomped his feet and roared. His voice was filled with tears, and his body was trembling uncontrollably. "Cry. Why don't you cry? Why don't you cry, ah? If you really cry, I'll let you off. Why aren't you crying yet?" 9 serenities and 14 masters said calmly. He had predicted that a peerless expert like Chu Wu Hui would definitely care about his own status, especially now that there were other people beside him, and there were even juniors present. He definitely wouldn't lower himself to cry out loud. Besides, eating earthworms is not a big deal. This young noble had eaten them before when he was sealed. Although it wasn't delicious, it wasn't poisonous either. If I hadn't experienced it, would this young noble have made this bet? Everything had a drop in the 10,000, but he had definitely underestimated the threat of eating earthworms to ordinary people. Before 9 serenities and 14 masters finished speaking, Chu Wu Hui suddenly sat on the ground and slapped his hands on the ground, crying loudly. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and he was truly grieving to the extreme. His voice was full of emotion. His cry was so sorrowful that it shook the heavens and the earth, and his tears flowed freely. In an instant, the 9 other 14th young master, Jun Mo Xie, Xiao Ying, and Qingyin Xiao all had the same expression on their faces. Their eyes were wide open, and their mouths were wide open, their eyeballs almost popping out of their sockets. CK, your grandpa? You're really crying, ah? 9 serenities and 14 masters looked at him angrily and cursed. This was simply too unexpected. This was the guardian of Heaven's Saint Palace. Crying a few times can avoid eating earthworms. Why wouldn't I cry? Ask everyone here, what would they choose? Chu Wu Hui stopped crying and raised his teary eyes to look at 9 serenities and 14 masters. "Tell me, how else do you want me to cry? Should I cry standing up or sitting down? Should I cry lying on my stomach or facing the sky? Should I cry running or jumping around? Even if I have to twist my butt and dance while crying, this old man will throw caution to the wind and fight you, as long as I don't eat earthworms. The faces of ordinary people are all made up of a layer of skin on one side, but the experts of the Holy Lands are not limited by this. They all put one layer of skin on the other side, making one side look like a two-faced person, while the other side is shameless. How can we compare to such talent? I originally thought that only people like Zhang Mubai and Hai Wuya were like this, but it turns out that Senior is the true outstanding talent. This junior is in awe. Jun Moxie bowed deeply and said with a look of admiration on his face. He really had no choice but to be in awe. This kind of skin was too domineering, and this kind of skin was too amazing. Forget it, to actually be serious with someone like you. This young master has been too arrogant. If I continue to interact with a shameless person like you, it will only damage this young master's reputation. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters let out a long sigh and shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, his body floated up and disappeared without a trace with a shio sound. Only a few words floated over. Junbrat, don't worry and go get the exquisite lotus boldly. If anything happens to you, this young master will definitely pursue this matter to the end as the arbiter, even if it means completely wiping out the 3 holy lands. To me, this is not a difficult matter, huh? His voice lingered in the air. As for 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, he had already disappeared without a trace. But this promise from 9 Serenities and 14 Masters was more important than anything else. With this promise, it was equivalent to giving Jun Moxie a talisman that was impervious to all evils. No matter how much the Holy Lands wanted to act shamelessly or deal with Jun Moxie, they would not dare to do so. Although Jun Moxie was 100% confident that nothing would happen to him, hearing these words still made him feel a little touched. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters, whether he was arrogant or crazy, but he was definitely a sentimental person. He was a friend worth befriending. The faces of the 3 guardians of the Holy Lands changed slightly. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters' threat was definitely not a joke. Seeing that the calamity was over, Chu Wu Hui hurriedly crawled up. 9 Serenities and 14 Masters had already left, so he naturally did not want to cry anymore. Glaring fiercely at Xiao Ying and Changyin Xiao, he said fiercely, "What are you two laughing at? If you really have the ability, why don't you go and eat some raw earthworms?" Changyin Xiao laughed loudly and said, "Eat what? We'll make a bet." Chu Wu Hui snorted and turned to Jun Moxie. "Junbrat, you are not allowed to leak a single word of what happened today. Otherwise, I won't let you off." Jun Moxie put on a simple and honest face and said, "Senior Chu, what do you mean by today's matter? Are you talking about fighting? Or are you talking about giving an explanation? Or are you afraid that this junior will tell others about how the Holy Lands are so important that they go back on their word and gang up on me? You have to explain it clearly. If you don't explain it clearly, how would this junior know what you're talking about? You brat, you dare to feign ignorance in front of this daddy." Chu Wu Hui flew into a rage out of humiliation and rubbed his palms together with a ferocious look on his face, as if he was about to start a fight at the slightest disagreement. This junior understands now. You're referring to the matter that you're crying about." Jun Moxie had a look of realization on his face as he clicked his tongue and praised. "I have to say, Senior Chu's crying just now was really in tune and full of emotion." His voice was full of emotion, lingering in the air for 3 days. To be able to cry to such a standard, this junior can't even be filled with admiration. How could it be that? Chu Wu Hui's face turned as red as a pig's liver, and he was speechless. On the other hand, Xiao Ying and Cheng Yin Xiao laughed. "Let's go." Cheng Yin Xiao glanced at Jun Moxie and said, "I'm sure young Master Jun can't wait to obtain that exquisite lotus. There's no rush. I've been very free recently, so I still have some time. Even if I have to accompany the 3 of you here and chat until next year, I'll still have time to accompany you. It's a good thing to be able to seek guidance from the 3 of you." Jun Moxie said with a smile. "You have time, but we don't. Chu Hui said exasperatedly. Suddenly, he raised his palm. At the edge of the field, that huge stone tablet, which was more than 100 feet away, suddenly disintegrated into dust without a sound. Let them be buried here, quietly. Don't let outsiders disturb them. Chu Wu Hui sighed, glancing at the mess on the ground. He turned around and left. Jun Moxie rubbed his nose as he thought to himself, "You King destroyed the strange stone tablet that I've painstakingly created, and you didn't even ask me about it. How preposterous! Or is it that the fist is the bigger reason? Damn it." Left with no choice, he could only follow behind Chu Wu Hui and the others. Chapter 896. The movement techniques of these four people were extremely fast. They traveled all the way to the southeast, and in just a few days, they had already run a few thousand miles. In these few days, the four of them did not speak much. Chengyin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui were more open-minded, but Xiaoying was filled with worrying about the outcome of the war for seizing the heavens. In these few days, she had become much more haggard. Originally, with her cultivation, she should not have become like this, but the worry in her heart was difficult to dispel. The four of them traveled further and further away from the human world. The more they traveled, the more desolate it became. After walking for a few more days, they finally reached the peak of a tall mountain. Looking around, it was a stretch of mountains that seemed to stretch to the ends of the sky. Looking back, the mountains and rivers were like a painting, and they could faintly see the nearby towns, although they were already blurry. Jun Moxie, the name of this mountain, is called Human Realm. It means that the northern side of this mountain is the human world, whereas the southern side is a barren land. Xiaoying focused her eyes on the faint signs of human habitation in the north as she spoke faintly. Human Realm? What a strange name. Jun Moxie replied. He thought to himself, Xiaoying has been ignoring me all this time, but now she suddenly wants to talk to me. Why is it? Do you see it? The further north you go, the denser the human world is. And most of the human world's inheritances are gathered there. After tens of thousands of years of development and reproduction, it finally became the flourishing world we have today. Xiaoying Lingling looked at Jun Moxie. And the thing that guarantees all of this is the war for seizing the heavens. Do you see it? From here to the south, the furthest and also the highest mountain is the pillar of heaven's mountains. And the war for seizing the heavens will be held there. Jun Mo Xie looked into the distance, only to see a majestic mountain rising straight up into the sky amidst the clouds. Above the clouds, there was also the body of that mountain. It was impossible to see where the peak of the mountain was, as if it pierced through the heavens. If the war for seizing the heavens is lost, the strange races will invade the human world, and the tens of thousands of years of human prosperity will be destroyed. All the prosperity in front of him would turn into hell on earth. In fact, all humans will become slaves and food for the alien races. Xiaoying Lingling said heavily. And just a few days ago, those 30 people that you personally slaughtered were experts that were about to shed their blood for the entire human race in the war for seizing the heavens. Do you know what it means to lose those people? What does it mean? Jun Moxie tilted his head. This means that the Xian continent will be defeated in this war for seizing the heavens. The invasion of the strange races was about to become a foregone conclusion, a fact. The continent is plunged into misery and suffering, and the scene of devastation is right before our eyes. Xiaoying said heavily, her eyes spitting fire, and the main culprit behind all of this is the battle you started. Jun Mo Xie, don't tell me you don't feel guilty? Guilty conscience? Why should I feel guilty? Jun Moxie said calmly, what you're talking about, the destruction of the people, the invasion of the alien tribes, that has nothing to do with me. You. Xiaoying didn't expect that the young hero who controlled such a powerful force would actually say such irresponsible words. She was so angry that her face turned pale, and she couldn't say anything for a long time. Jun Moxie didn't care about Xiaoying's disappointment at all. He turned his face away and continued mercilessly. I'm already sick of hearing about the safety of the continent. I don't want to hear anyone mention these words in the future, especially in front of this young master. Because the moment I hear it, my balls hurt. And don't associate these righteous things with this young master. These things have nothing to do with this young master at all. You say you don't want to hear it, but you're harming the interests of the world, Chowing said sternly. The war for seizing the heavens is about to fail because of you. Because of you, countless lives will be plunged into misery and suffering. You didn't kill them, but they will die because of you. Why do you have to say that you don't want to hear it? How is it unrelated to you? Do you know how many innocent lives will be lost because of you? Bullshit. The lives of the world will die because of me. There's no smoke without fire. The reason I kill people is because people want to kill me, June Moxie said angrily. This daddy has never provoked the three holy lands. This daddy has never even offended you. But you King use your sanctimonious faces to do all sorts of things, coming wave after wave to find trouble with me. I can't get rid of you, and now you still have the face to blame me? Even if many people really die because of this, it's the responsibility of your *TTY Holy Lands. It has nothing to do with this daddy. This daddy was originally the descendant of the Duke of Tianxiang City. I was rich and had a life of luxury. But because of your ruthlessness, I had no choice but to abandon my family and retreat to the Tian Fa forest to live with the thousands of Xian beasts. This daddy is already backed down to this point, but you still won't let it go. You still attack my family, my friends, and anyone related to the June family. You won't let them off. You even ran to the Tian Fa forest to assassinate me. If it weren't for the fact that this daddy has some abilities and has some trump cards that I haven't used up, I would have been killed 800 times by you bastards. You're simply bastards. The guardian of the continent? The three holy lands are all a bunch of bastards, including the three of you. And now you still have the nerve to talk about justice and the lives of the world with me? Ask yourselves, are you even worthy? You can't kill me, but instead, you're blaming me for the deaths of the world's people? Is there such a thing? Since you have the intention to kill me, I'll kill you first. It's that simple. So what if you're doing it for the sake of the world? Even if you're doing it for the sake of the universe, even if you're the only remaining pillars of the world, killing you will cause the sky to collapse. As long as you want to kill me, I'll still kill you. At most, we'll just split up and everyone will die together. June Moxie smiled coldly and said, everyone only has one *king life. If people die, birds fly up. If they don't die, they'll just continue to cause trouble. So what if the world is plunged into misery and suffering? I don't care about these things. You want me to be righteous? That's impossible. I've never thought of myself as a hero or a righteous person. You want to talk to me about the common people of the world? You've misunderstood me. So what if this continent really collapses? After tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, it'll still be a new world. But no matter who you are, please don't think of yourself as a savior. That's disgusting. June Dashao smiled maliciously and looked at Xiaoing. Have you heard the idiom, a monkey wearing crown? A monkey wearing a crown thinks he's a king? Don't you think your three holy lands are laughable? Comparatively, you're just a bunch of stronger monkeys. What right do you have to represent the world? What right do you have to call yourself a savior? Okay, even if you claim to be a savior, it's fine. But don't make yourself sound so noble first, and then use this nobility to attack others. You don't have that right. I'll say it again, you're not worthy. Jun Mo Xie had said it so smoothly that he had even said, okay, without even noticing it. Let's take 10,000 steps back. You can put yourself on the pedestal of a savior because of some things you've done. No one will care about that. But don't expect others to repay you. The three of you are old and should be able to tell the difference between being active and being passive. You did those things because you were willing. It seems like no one has ever held a knife to your neck and forced you to sacrifice yourselves. You can choose not to do it. This isn't your duty. Do you understand? Let me tell you, no matter who is missing in this world, it won't affect anything. Even without your 3 holy lands, the strange races might not be anything special. Understand? What a joke. After a long speech, Jun Moxie cursed to his heart's content. But when he finished speaking, he discovered that the 3 people beside him didn't say anything. Instead, their faces were heavy, as though they were deep in thought. After standing at the peak of the mortal realm for a long time, Chu Wu Hui finally let out a long sigh. Let's go. From here, there's still another 3 days of travel. Xiao Ying, whose face was filled with anger and then turned solemn, didn't reprimand Jun Moxie anymore. The 4 of them flew silently, like 4 shooting stars streaking across the land. As the saying goes, the mountain in sight runs to the death. From the peak of the mortal realm, they could clearly see the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. But even with the speed of these 4 experts, they still hadn't reached the foot of the mountain even after flying for 2 days. Jun Moxie was very curious. How could they see the Pillar of Heaven's mountains from several thousand li away? Even if his eyesight was good, it shouldn't be to that extent, right? After all, the distance was too far. As though seeing through Jun Moxie's doubts, Chu Wu Hui smiled lightly and said, "You'll understand when you get there." Speaking of which, it was strange. Ever since Jun Moxie had said those words, the attitude of the 3 people toward Jun Moxie had become much better. This caused Jun Moxie to feel a little suspicious. Could it be that these 3 fellows were just asking for a scolding? Or were they the legendary masochist? Were they the typical type of people who were looking for a beating for no reason? Do you want this young master to scold them every few days? It's just moving my mouth. It doesn't take much effort. Just as he was considering the feasibility of this idea, he suddenly discovered that Chu Wu Hui and the other 2 had stopped. His heart stirred, and he also stopped in his tracks. Xiao Ying's tone was filled with a sense of relief as she muttered, "The mountain in front is where the Heaven's Saint Palace is." Her tone was filled with the joy of returning home. Jun Moxie looked over and saw that tens of li ahead, a majestic mountain had risen from the ground. At the peak of the mountain, a few houses could be faintly seen amidst the white snow. As they got closer, Jun Moxie suddenly discovered that there were tens of thatched cottages there. A few lush tree trunks propped up the main body of the house, and there were even green buds growing out of them. The roofs were covered with vines. It was a building that could not be any more crude. This is the legendary Heaven's Saint Palace? Jun Moxie stared at it in a daze and suddenly turned his head back in disbelief. In his heart, the legendary Heaven's Saint Palace should be a magnificent palace. How could he have imagined that it would be in such a dilapidated state right in front of him? Xiao Ying smiled proudly and said, "This is the Heaven's Saint Palace. Admirable." Jun Moxie said sincerely. As the strongest expert of the continent, he was actually willing to live in such a place. No matter what, it was enough to make others admire him. "Many thanks." Xiao Ying smiled lightly, feeling very satisfied with Jun Moxie's words. She could tell that Jun Moxie's admirable was from the bottom of his heart, and her bad impression of Jun Moxie also changed slightly. 300 li east of the Heaven's Saint Palace is the mountain peak where Hermitage is. Another 1,000 li diagonally away is the supreme Golden City. About 2,000 li to the west is the illusory Blood Sea. The mountain where the Heaven's Saint Palace is located is called the Heaven's Saint Mountain by the 3 Holy Lands. And just 1,000 li south of the Heaven's Saint Mountain is the place that will decide the fate of the continent, the Pillar of Heaven's Peak. At the peak of the Pillar of Heaven's Peak, there is a huge area that has collapsed, and a war for seizing the heavens will be held here. So, it's here. This place is really hard to find. Jun Moxie smacked his lips and asked, "Those 3 places, are they all like the Heaven's Saint Palace?" A trace of awkwardness appeared on Xiao Ying's face as she stammered. "Those 3 places, cough cough, compared to this place, are slightly more luxurious." Jun Moxie let out a meaningful "oh" and said, "Slightly luxurious? What kind of explanation is that? To actually let their ancestors live in such a simple and crude place. It would be understandable if they were also so simple. but it's a pity that the truth is very different. Frugality has always been the tradition of the Heaven Saint Palace. Chingyin Xiao said lightly. It seemed to be an argument. What good tradition? It's really not easy for you guys to not freeze or starve to death. It's all thanks to your Xian Qi. Xian Qi is really a good thing. At least you won't starve to death. Jun Daxiao sighed. The faces of the three instantly darkened. So it's really this kind of frugality, Jun Moxie finally reached the top of Mount Heaven Saint and clicked his tongue in wonder. F***CK. Such frugality, this daddy wishes for it, even in my dreams. Can you guys not be so F***king hypocritical? F***CK. This is called frugality? Frugality your face. I wish your entire family riches. Jun Daxiao finally got a good look at the thatched cottage of the Heaven Saint Palace from such a close distance. He couldn't help but be enraged. F***CK. To think that it was actually like this after deceiving this daddy's heartfelt admiration. The entire mountain peak was flat, and the spiritual qi was so dense that it had almost materialized. Although it wasn't as dense, pure as the spiritual qi in the Hongjun Pagoda, it was still filled with the essence of plants. The Heaven Saint Palace was made up of a total of 100 houses, and the pillars of each house were all large trees that were still growing. And this kind of tree, Jun Moxie recognized it. Xianling wood. The age of the Xianling wood could reach up to 10,000 years, and when it was cut into pieces and worn on the body, it would have the effect of calming one's mind. A living Xianling wood was an existence similar to a small spirit gathering formation, and it could automatically gather heaven-earth spiritual qi. This time, every house required at least 6 or more Xianling wood. Cultivating Xian Qi in such an environment, one would never have to worry about one's mind going haywire or going berserk. Chapter 897. As for the walls of the thatched cottage, they were all made up of stalks of tranquil bamboo, densely packed and neatly arranged to form the walls. This tranquil bamboo was not considered too rare, and it did not have much use. But as long as this thing was here, the nearby poisonous insects and whatnot would not dare to come close. And this thing had another advantage. It was warm in winter and cool in summer, a natural air conditioner, and it could emit a kind of tranquil and serene smell all year round. Paired with the Xianling wood, these small thatched cottages were like a heaven for cultivation. This was F***king, much more useful than mosquito coils. Jun Daxiao's heart was filled with jealousy, undisguised jealousy. When he looked at the roof and the vines wrapped around the Xianling wood, Jun Daxiao's eyes turned as green as a wolf's. Phoenix tail vine, sacred vine, purple silk vine, fleece flower vine, 8 treasure branches, longevity vine. Jun Daxiao sucked in a breath of cold air, as if he had a toothache. These were all rare, heavenly treasures, F***CK. You guys are too thrifty. This daddy may be the wealthiest person in the world now, but even I do not dare to be so extravagant, This bunch of bastards from Heaven Saint Palace, living in this kind of place that even gods would find hard to find, they actually have the face to act shabby in front of me, saying that thrifty is a fine tradition of Heaven Saint Palace. Thrifty your sister. How dare you say that? Why don't you just go and die? These words were too unconscionable. How is it? Young Master Jun, this mountain residence is simple and crude. Please do not blame me for neglecting you. Chu Wu Hui said reservedly. Jun Moxie shivered and suddenly grabbed Chu Wu Hui's hand with tears in his eyes. Senior Chu, thrifty and plain living are the greatest virtues of humans. I also want to F***king learn from you guys and live a thrifty life so that I can remember the bitterness and sweetness of life. Let me move a few of these thatched cottages. I don't need too many, just 5 or 6 will do. Let this junior emulate the virtues of the seniors. Scram. You brat, dream on. Chu Wu Hui scolded. This fellow really knew how to open his mouth like a lion. He actually said 5 or 6 rooms in one go. What did he think he was talking about? Hermitage, Missouri Wudao had been begging for a few hundred years, but he had only asked for a few stalks. So far, he had only given him less than half of what he asked for. Xiaoying, you're back? Are there other important guests coming as well? Why don't you come in for a chat? A gentle voice sounded leisurely, without the slightest hint of anger. The expressions of the three of them became somewhat solemn as they replied in a low voice, yes. He then turned to Jun Moxie and said, Young Master Jun, please. Then I won't be polite. Jun Moxie chuckled and walked in front. He asked casually, there are a total of 136 such houses here, but I wonder, are they all full? All of them? How is that possible? Chu Wu Hui shook his head. More than half of them are empty. In the past 10,000 years, only those who have successfully advanced to the Holy Emperor realm have the qualifications to stay here. Some time ago, in the Tian Fa forest, we lost quite a few people. This time, you even killed one of them. Currently, there are less than 60 people here. 60 people. 60 Holy Emperor or experts above the Holy Emperor realm. Jun Moxie sucked in a breath of cold air. Gritting his teeth, he asked, where are the two seniors staying here? The two of us are the left and right protectors, but that is just an empty title. Our strength is around 10 or so. Not worth a mention. Although Chu Wu Hui said not worth a mention, the look of pride on his face was obvious to anyone. Admirable, admirable, I really want to vomit. Jun Moxie had a look of admiration on his face. Chu Wu Hui was indeed Jun Dashao's biggest target of vomiting recently. Whenever he thought of this old fellow's face covered in snot and tears, it was difficult not to vomit. As they spoke, the four of them had already walked to the door of the largest thatched cottage in the center. This thatched cottage occupied an area of about 5 to 6 zhang, and the Xin spiritual wood, tranquil bamboo, as well as all sorts of spirit flowers and herbs, were clearly older. With one look, it was obvious that this was the most central location of the Heaven Saint Palace. Come in. A warm and gentle voice came from inside, and as this voice rang out, the door of the thatched cottage suddenly opened soundlessly. Even with Jun Moxie's cultivation, he actually did not feel the slightest bit of Xian Qi. The three of them had not even moved when they suddenly heard a surprised voice from inside. The voice was extremely soft, but the surprise in it was clear. Chengyin Xiao, Chu Wu Hui, and Xiao Ying's faces suddenly changed. This was the voice of the Palace Lord. For more than 1,000 years, the Palace Lord had never been surprised by anything. But today, he suddenly made such a sound. Could it be that it had something to do with Jun Moxie? Then, there seemed to be a moment of silence. Following that, a figure could be seen floating in the air. When the three of them walked in, they saw that there were 10 chairs on the left and right of the room. Only 3 of the chairs were empty, while the rest were all filled with people. According to Jun Moxie's estimation, the altitude of this place was at least 7,000 to 8,000 meters. But there was no feeling of lack of oxygen at all. Outside, there were layers of ice and snow that would never melt, but in this hall that was full of holes, it was actually as warm as spring. The moment the 4 of them walked in, the 16 gazes of the 8 people in the room all landed on Jun Moxie at the same time. The seemingly warm and indifferent gazes were like the most precise searchlights. Jun Moxie only felt as if he was being looked at naked, but he was rather calm about it. In any case, we're all men, so let's look. It's fine as long as you guys don't feel inferior after looking. Of course, even if you feel inferior, there's nothing you can do. Who asked you to not have such good DNA as this young master? It was unknown when Xiao Ying and the other 2 had already sat down silently. The 3 chairs that had been reserved were precisely for them. Jun Moxie noticed that Xiao Ying sat in the middle of the 5 chairs on the left, while Chengyin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui sat on the 2 seats closest to the sides, one on each side. No wonder they were called protectors, so it was like this. Trash that stood at the side, their status was not even as high as a woman. Jun Dashao cursed without restraint. He did not know that because of her all-seeing eye, Xiao Ying's status in the Heaven Saint Palace was extremely special. Her status was only slightly lower than the Palace Lord of the Heaven Saint Palace. And although Chengyin Xiao and Chu Wu Hui's status was not high, they were only below the people here. Even the city lords and palace lords of the three holy lands had to be extremely respectful when they saw them. Everyone present was dressed in robes as white as snow. Even though these people were clearly people from several hundred years ago, not a single one of them was an old man with a head full of white hair. From a single glance, these people were all the healthiest and strongest of men. All of them had black hair and jade-like skin. From the looks of it, they were all middle-aged, handsome men. June Moxie cursed in his heart. Middle-aged, handsome men? A bunch of old monsters that are so old that they can't even stand a chance. Trying to fool this young master? June Moxie had never forgotten that any one of these middle-aged men in front of him was at least 1,000 years old. They were definitely a bunch of old monsters. Numerous sharp gazes landed on June Moxie, but no one spoke first. In that moment, the entire room was exceptionally silent, and everyone's expression became more and more solemn. "How is this, lad?" It was still the same gentle voice from before. This voice came from above him, but it was directed at the other people. June Moxie could not help but feel a little surprised in his heart. Although everyone's gazes were on him earlier, he only felt 16 gazes. Furthermore, he did not notice that there was someone else above him. Now that this voice sounded out again, only then did June Dashao realize that right in front of him there was a person smiling at him. Although he had already confirmed the existence of this person, he still had a feeling that he could not see clearly. This person was clearly in front of him, but June Moxie felt that it was an illusion. It was as if this was just a shadow projected by someone from another time and space. This feeling seemed to have only been felt by the 9 serenities and 14 masters before. Without a doubt, this person's realm had obviously reached the superb realm of breaking through the void. He was afraid that he was only one step away from the so-called final step of breaking through the void. This person's cultivation was probably only below that of the 9 serenities and 14 masters. Even if there was a certain gap between them, the gap would not be too big. At most, it would just be a little weaker. With this understanding, June Moxie could not help but feel his hair stand on end. He did not expect that there would be such a super strong existence on the side of the Holy Land. Since there was such a strong existence, then why did they allow the 9 serenities and 14 masters to run amok for so many years? They might not be able to defeat him one-on-one, but both sides already had a deep grudge against each other. In a situation where their realm was similar, as long as there were a few more people with enough strength and realm, it would be enough to kill the enemy. Even the 9 serenities and 14 masters might not even have a chance to escape. As June Moxie was pondering, he heard the first person on the right say elegantly, "This person is undoubtedly a rare genius since the beginning of time." The second person on the left sighed and said, "That's right. If we let him develop, I believe that his future achievements might not be inferior to the 9 other first young master back then. He might even be higher." The moment these two people opened their mouths, they gave June Moxie the greatest recognition. After the two finished speaking, the rest of the people nodded their heads. The fourth person on the right had a faint birthmark on his face. He said, "This child is indeed very young." According to this old man's repeated observations, his hair has not undergone any transformation, and the texture of his face is also natural. There is no trace of the lustrous, jade-like luster of youth. Below his ears and cheeks, there are still baby hairs. I can confirm that this person's real age is definitely not more than 20 years old. The rest nodded their heads in agreement again. The eyes of the first person on the left were as sharp as an eagle's. He looked at June Moxie's eyes for a long time and said, "Apart from what I've just said, what's more commendable is, if a normal youth has such achievements, no matter how steady his personality is, his temperament will be completely different from an ordinary youth. But this person before us is definitely not one of them." When this person heard our praises, although his face was filled with joy and pride, it was all an act. He snorted lightly and said, "There's a smile in his eyes, complacency, and even pride. But it's only on the surface. The true brilliance in his eyes is completely concealed. This person's steadiness and seriousness is far above that of an ordinary holy emperor expert. Even when I reached this person's current level, my state of mind was still far from his. That makes a lot of sense. This person's temperament is extremely resolute. His current achievements are already so outstanding, but he is still not satisfied. His desire to improve is still burning. Although he has a leisurely smile on his face, there's only a slight curve between his lips and his cheeks. However, this was deliberately formed after birth, and not the original innate appearance. This shows that this person's temperament is ruthless, and cold. He will definitely use any means to deal with his enemies. No matter what, there will always be some pity in the hearts of people, and there are very few exceptions. But in this person's heart, there is not a single drop of it. This is the heart of an extremely cruel and persevering expert. The second person on the right observed carefully and slowly gave his conclusion. The third person on the right sat upright, like a javelin, and when he spoke, it was like metal striking metal. Yes, now he's standing here, allowing us to criticize him, but the expression on his face hasn't changed. Even the look in his eyes hasn't changed. His robe is steady, like the water of a lake. His hands and feet don't move at all, but it's natural. In other words, he has absolute confidence in escaping. This is puzzling. If this kid's strength is only in terms of age, then it's truly astounding and inconceivable. However, he's still not a match for any one of us. So where does his confidence in being able to retreat unscathed come from? Facing the 11 of us at the same time, even if he is the 9 serenities and 14 masters, there's no way he can survive. But I actually recognize his confidence that comes from the bottom of his heart, that no one can shake. This person is very scary, really scary. This was the conclusion the 6 people came to in unison after a moment of silence. Jun Moxie looked down and smiled calmly, as if he did not care, but he was extremely shocked in his heart. These people's eyes were really like torches. Even a few strands of hair on his body could not escape their eyes. As expected of the legendary old demons, their observation skills were actually to this extent. But it was a pity that although they had seen through his confidence, they still did not have the ability to reveal his true trump card. Or rather, other than the 9 nether first young master, no one in this world would know what his true trump card was. But everyone has overlooked one thing, the most important thing. At this time, the white-robed man sitting at the highest position spoke. His voice was always gentle and warm, like a clear spring in the mountains, refreshing the mind. Just now, the 11 of us were observing this person together. During this observation, we might not have noticed it, but we would still release our own unique aura, intentionally or unintentionally. Even if it was a little bit unintentionally leaked, but the sum of the 11 of us together, I believe that even if any of you were in his position, you might not be able to withstand it. You would have to release your own aura to be able to match it. Only then can you ensure that there are no flaws in your state of mind. But he didn't. Not at all. The person sitting at the highest position spoke softly, but this sentence caused the expressions of the 7 people below to change at the same time. The person sitting at the highest position smiled faintly and raised his head, looking at Jun Moxie indifferently. But it was this glance that made Jun Dashao feel as if his eyes were pierced by 2 red-hot steel needles. Unconsciously, Jun Moxie narrowed his eyes, and 2 rays of cold light shot out from his eyes, meeting that pair of indifferent eyes. This was the first time that Jun Dashao had taken the initiative to make a move since he entered this place. When their eyes met, that person's eyes were as vast as the boundless sea. When the sharp divine light from Jun Moxie looked into it, it was as if he saw the vast, starry sky, the endless universe. But no matter how deep and boundless the sea was, how mysterious and boundless the starry sky was, Jun Moxie's eyes were like 2 parallel long swords, straight and stubborn, following the direction from which they shot out, without any hesitation, without any disguise. The other 10 people in the room all felt a wave of murderous aura at the same time. Although this murderous aura was not considered very strong to the people present, it felt extremely sharp. This sharp, murderous aura had a kind of extreme unyieldingness, as if it could even face the gods and Buddhas in the heavens. The other 10 people were all shocked at the same time. This was a different kind of battle that was out of the ordinary, a contest of mental power, but the 10 of them could not remember when it had started. It seemed like there was no longer anyone in this world who dared to compete with their boss, not to mention challenging their boss's most proficient mental power. Even if it was other martial arts, not many people would dare to challenge him. In this world, there were only 3 people who had the qualifications to compete with their boss. One was naturally the 9 serenities and 14 masters, and the other was the old ancestor of the Misty Mansion, Luo Fuyun. As for the third, it was the mysterious leader of the strange races, Chuangshang Beitong. However, that disgusting strange races person was a conjoined body and had twice the mental power of a normal person. It could be considered a special case, and could not be considered as his true strength. Who would have thought that another person would appear today? And such a lawless and extraordinary youth. A look of pity appeared in the eyes of the 10 people. Such a talented youth would probably be completely lost in Boss's misty starry sky and suffer a mental injury, stopping here for the rest of his life. This kind of ending was really too much of a pity, but it was already decided. The 2 of them stared at each other from a short distance of 4 to 5 zhang. Jun Moxie felt that he had suddenly barged into someone else's territory. It was as if the endless void was someone else's territory, and he was just an intruder. However, all mental powers had their limits. For example, if you draw an ocean, although it looks exactly like the ocean, it's still a narrow canvas in essence. The limit of the canvas was only the limit of the person. That was all. So Jun Moxie did not care, and continued to barge forward. Even if there was a piece of blue sky in front of me, I would still dig a hole through it. Time passed quietly, and it was already close to the time for an incense stick to burn. The expressions on the 10 people's faces had already turned from pity to shock. Shock to the extreme. Could it be that this youth was a monster? Under Boss's mental attack, not only was he able to withstand it, he was even brazenly counterattacking, and was still not at a disadvantage until now. This was simply unimaginable. This battle record was really unbelievable. Jun Moxie's divine sense pierced through a piece of blue sky, a piece of blue sea, and then a group of thousands of high-level Shin beasts, and finally broke through a sea of fire. These were obviously all illusions set up by the opponent, so Jun Moxie did not care, and directly chose to break through. My goal is to reach the other side, and I will absolutely not stop halfway. Slowly, Jun Moxie's face finally turned a little pale, and beads of sweat quietly seeped out of his forehead. It slowly flowed down, converging into a big drop at the tip of his nose, and then quietly fell. The beads of sweat fell to the ground and made a soft sound. Jun Moxie suddenly felt that he had come into contact with something as thick as a wall, and was about to use the previous method to forcibly break through, but he suddenly felt empty, and there was no place for him to exert force. It turned out that he had actually left the range of the opponent's sea of knowledge. He suddenly opened his eyes and saw that the middle-aged man opposite him was still looking at him with a smile on his face, and there was not a trace of abnormality. Everything that had happened just now seemed like a dream. In front of him, in front of the tip of his toes, there was only a drop of sweat that could be clearly seen. "Who are you?" The middle-aged man opposite him smiled and asked Jun Moxie. Although he spoke and smiled as usual, and even his tone and demeanor did not have the slightest change, the people on both sides had been accompanying him for nearly 1,000 years, and how could they not see the clues? They clearly saw a trace of fear flash through their boss's eyes. In an instant, everyone's mind was shaken. Today was really a special day, and one shock followed another. "Me? I am Jun Moxie." Jun Moxie smiled faintly. "This old man naturally knows that you're Jun Moxie. I already knew when you had just arrived at Mount Heavenly Saint. But what I want to ask is..." The expression on the middle-aged man's face became solemn, and he said word by word, "You? Who are you?" He already knew that the person in front of him was Jun Moxie, and yet he still insisted on asking, "Who are you?" This seemed very contradictory. However, the 10 people present all straightened their backs at the same time, and all 10 pairs of eyes became especially solemn. "I'm not who I am." Jun Moxie smiled evilly and said, "I understand what you are asking, but I am really just Jun Moxie. I am not someone else." When he said, "I am Jun Moxie," there were already 5 to 6 people who raised their eyebrows in disbelief. They had long heard that the 3 Holy Lands had provoked an extremely difficult opponent, and it seemed like he was called Jun Moxie. But only now did they understand what kind of freak the 3 Holy Lands had provoked this time. They could not help but curse the 3 Holy Lands decision-makers 10,000 times in their hearts. Such a freak. Why did you provoke him for no reason? Aren't you just looking for trouble? I heard that this kid has a mysterious master. If the disciple already has such strength, then wouldn't the master be even more terrifying? But when they unexpectedly heard the words, "I am only Jun Moxie, and not someone else," all 10 of them widened their eyes in shock. The 4th person on the right exclaimed, "This is impossible." Chapter 898. Are you really not the reincarnation of some senior's spiritual seed? The middle-aged man with a birthmark glared at Jun Moxie and said, "I believe you know that you've reached the peak of level 3 Holy Emperor before you're even 20 years old. But there's one thing you don't know. If you're not the reincarnation of a spiritual seed, you won't be able to achieve such speed." He added the last sentence in a gloomy tone. "Even if the 11 of us have been infusing energy into you since you were born, and have been supplemented with the best natural treasures along the way, and hadn't gone astray at all, it would still be impossible for you to have such achievements before the age of 20. What else do you want to deny? I'm not the reincarnation of a spiritual seed. I can't do anything if you don't believe me. Let me ask you, can the so-called reincarnation of a spiritual seed really achieve what I've achieved?" Jun Moxie spread out his hands and looked innocent. The middle-aged man with the birthmark was speechless. Even if he was the reincarnation of a spiritual seed, he wouldn't be able to achieve what Jun Moxie had achieved. Even if he was the reincarnation of a spiritual seed, even if he had the memories of his previous life, his cultivation level, and his foundation, even if he started cultivating before he was born, it would still be difficult for him to achieve what Jun Dashao had achieved. Although the reincarnation of a spiritual seed could provide the reincarnation with the most ideal cultivation environment, there was still a limit. What Jun Dashao had achieved was not something that a human could achieve. This kid is telling the truth. He's not the reincarnation of a spiritual seed. The white-robed man sitting at the head of the table sighed tiredly and said this earth-shattering answer. "Just now, when our divine senses intersected, I have checked it thoroughly. His divine senses are one, and there is absolutely no alienation. He's not the combination of 2 lives." As soon as he said that, everyone's expression changed. Their divine senses were one with no separation. The meaning of this sentence was clear to everyone present. For a reincarnation of a spiritual seed, it would need to find a pregnant woman who was about to give birth and borrow her body to give birth. But normally, there was already another innate soul in the body of the unborn baby. If one wanted to take it away, the original soul must be killed. Only then could he rely on this body to survive. In this way, the body would naturally be reborn. Moreover, the body would be in the state of sentient embryonic breath even before birth. Naturally, the road of cultivation would be smooth. However, everything has its advantages and disadvantages. The reincarnation of the spirit seed also had a huge disadvantage: the alienation of the divine sense. After all, the reincarnation of the spiritual seed had killed an innate soul. After killing the innate soul, the spiritual world that he obtained was not something that he had innately brought with him. Therefore, he could only slowly familiarize himself with it and transform it. But no matter to what extent, there would always be a sense of alienation, and it would always exist. This was also the last and most dangerous stage for the so-called peak cultivators, the 100 tempering of inner demons to reforge the soul. According to legend, if a cultivator was able to overcome this barrier, then they would be able to freely shatter the void, open the door of the heavens and the earth, and travel as they pleased. However, if they were unable to overcome this barrier, then the consequence would be the destruction of their soul. Whether it was the previous life or this life, they had all turned into nothingness. The difficulty of this trial was definitely more dangerous than the heavenly tribulation. Since the beginning of time, no one had ever charged out, shatter the void, open the door of the heavens and the earth, and travel freely between different planes in the 10,000 years of the Xian continent. Only the Nine Nether First Young Master had managed to do it. Not only did he do it, he even brought his hundreds of wives to travel at the same time. The so-called legend was actually the words left behind by the Nine Nether First Young Master. It was also the last stage of the Xian skills that he had passed down. But no one knew that the reason why the Nine Nether First Young Master could do it was because he was not the reincarnation of some spiritual seed. His wives were the same as well. So there was no danger of the 100 tempering of inner demons to reforge the soul. As for the descendants who did not cultivate to the peak directly from the spiritual seed, in 10,000 years, there had not been one. The middle-aged man in front was the reincarnation of the spiritual seed after the death of the previous guardian. There were 5 other people who had the same experience as him, and these 6 people were the 6 people with the highest cultivation in the Heaven's Saint Palace. Although the other people were also allowed to attend, their real cultivation levels were worlds apart from the 6 of them. Today, there was actually a freak who was not the reincarnation of a spiritual seed, but had cultivated to the peak of the 3rd level of the Holy Emperor before the age of 20. This was something that no one had ever dreamt of in the past. To explain young Master Jun's outstanding achievements, the fact that he was the reincarnation of a spirit seed was the only possible explanation they could come up with. But at this moment, this only explanation was completely shattered by a few words from someone else. Of course, they did not know that although Jun Moxie was not the reincarnation of a spiritual seed, he was not born and raised here. Similarly, he had a different soul and was not even a sentient body. But because he had the Hongjun Pagoda, he had already polished all these to the point that there was not a single trace of it. Inner demons, heavenly tribulations, and whatnot were not in his eyes at all. Although you're not the reincarnation of a spiritual seed, your body still has the power of many spiritual herbs. Or rather, it is they that made you so strong today. The middle-aged man was still smiling, but there was a hint of warning in his voice. But everything has its pros and cons. You must pay attention to this because this is not a good thing for you. Although a rapid increase in a short period of time can give you great strength, but in the long run, there will be far-reaching consequences. When you break through again, you really need to calm your heart. It is best to completely digest these powers before you plan to break through. Otherwise, if you rush to the last hurdle in one go, the dangers that you will encounter in the end may not be any less than ours. In fact, it might even be more dangerous. Jun Moxie looked at him deeply and said, "Thank you." Jun Moxie could hear that these words of this man were completely giving him pointers, and it was a sincere one. Although he had the Hongjun Pagoda and did not need to worry about the last hurdle, the other party's kind intentions still made him feel very comfortable. Hearing that there were many spiritual herbs in the other party's body, the expressions of the other people instantly relaxed. Although it was still inconceivable, this kind of explanation was undoubtedly more acceptable. After all, there were too many unknown things in this world, and there might be some super heaven-defying spiritual herbs, and Jun Moxie's body just happened to be able to bear it, and this kind of coincidence had created this legend. Otherwise, compared to Jun Dashao, these old monsters who had lived for thousands of years should just kill themselves. This was too much of a blow to their self-esteem. Jun Moxie, although your current position makes you an enemy of the Holy Lands, this old man and the others do not wish to make things difficult for you. Today you followed Protector Chu and the other 2 here. So there must be a reason, right? The middle-aged man smiled, and his expression slowly became indifferent again, gradually returning to the strange state of his body in the void. At this point, the rest of the people suddenly sighed. For June Moxie to cultivate to such a level at such a young age, it was really a great miracle in this world. Therefore, when the boss saw him, he immediately summoned them here. And at the same time, he had a thought. With this speed, I'm afraid this kid will reach the peak in a very short time, or even surpass the peak. If he could go through the 100 refinements of the inner demons and reforge his soul in front of everyone, it would be a great reference for everyone. But now the boss had obviously given up on this tempting thought. However, they did not know that after the boss came into contact with June Moxie, this thought not only did not disappear, nor did he give up, but instead became even stronger. However, he had the ability to read people, and the moment he came into contact with June Moxie, he knew that June Moxie was definitely a stubborn donkey with a bad temper. If they directly raised a request to such a person, it would definitely be more difficult than ascending to the heavens. And with their status, they really could not put down their pride to ask for help. Fortunately, this kind of person had another weakness, and that was that he was afraid of owing favors. Therefore, they could only try their best to befriend him step by step. How far they could go would be counted as a step. Furthermore, in that moment of contact, he could already feel the strength of June Moxie's soul. Compared to him, it seemed like June Moxie had not used his full strength. If June Moxie had really attacked with his full strength, it was really an unknown matter whether he could receive it or not. This matter caused him to be extremely shocked, but he did not know that June Moxie had already used his full strength. As for that mysterious and powerful hidden strength, it was the power of the Hong Jun Pagoda. And regarding this point, he was not wrong at all. If there was anything wrong, it would be that he had underestimated that strength by a little. If June Moxie had used the full strength of the Hong Jun Pagoda after the fusion, and it was a pure spiritual attack, even if everyone in this room joined hands, they would not be able to receive it. How could the power of the Hong Jun Pagoda be something that humans could contend against? Seeing that the discussion had returned to the main topic, Chu Wu Hui hurriedly stood up and explained the bet in detail. When he heard that over 30 saints had died in this battle, and even the Holy Emperor's expert, Zhang Mubai, had fallen, the 8 people in the room did not have the slightest change in their expressions. Only a light sigh could be heard, coming from an unknown place, faintly discernible, carrying with it an inexplicable sense of melancholy. So you need that exquisite lotus? The middle-aged man in the lead closed his eyes and said indifferently, "No problem. If you're willing to bet, you have to be willing to admit defeat. I'll give it to you later." The moment these words were said, everyone looked at each other in shock. Many thanks. In the Holy Lands, there's finally someone who can keep his promise. June Moxie smiled lightly and raised his brows. "May I ask for your name?" Although these words sounded respectful, there was still a hint of disrespect in them. After all, the status of both parties was clear for all to see, and June Moxie just stood there. Although his cultivation was worlds apart from anyone else in this room, in the eyes of everyone, June Moxie's current demeanor was already comparable to their own boss. And that middle-aged man seemed to have been waiting for June Moxie to say these words. He opened his eyes and smiled. "What is this old man's name? I've really forgotten it already. The current me should be called Guhan, right? I remember that 3,000 years ago, my surname was Wu. Wu Shanyan was my name at that time." June Moxie's words seemed to have caused him to recall something. A trace of melancholy flashed across his usually ethereal eyes. Somewhere in the void, he let out a light sigh. This sigh seemed to sigh for 3,000 years, 3,000 years of joys and sorrows, life and death 3,000 years ago. This time, June Moxie was really shocked. This handsome middle-aged man with a youthful face and black hair was actually someone from 3,000 years ago. But from his words, June Moxie also understood one thing. Looks like this guy is the so-called reincarnation of a spirit seed. telling me the names of both lifetimes, this meaning was very obvious. Then should I call you Guhan or Wu Shanyan? Jun Moxie smiled. A name is just a code. It doesn't matter what you were called. Even if you want to call me an old fart, it doesn't matter. The middle-aged man said with a smile. Huh. The other party was very honest and treated him quite well. He did not make things difficult for him. So Jun Moxie decided to return the favor, because this was undoubtedly a huge favor. But what Jun Moxie did not want to owe the most was a favor, especially a favor from the Holy Lands. He looked at this Wu Shanyan, or Guhan, and said with a smile, 3,000 years, ah? Guhan, in these 3,000 years, how many wives did you marry? Those that could catch your eye? They must all be peerless beauties, right? And were they now? The moment these words came out, 10 out of the 11 people present showed expressions of anger, as if they were about to explode. A long lifespan was what they pursued, but in this long life, there were still many things that they could not bear to look back on, and could not forget. Every time they thought about it, it would be a heart-wrenching pain. Young Master Jun, your words are too much, Ching-Yin Xiao said heavily. As for Wu Shan-Yun, who was sitting at the head of the table, his face seemed to be covered by a thick veil. No one could see his face. Only an oppressive atmosphere reverberated in the room, making it hard for people to breathe. Too much. All right, then. I'll change my question, Jun Moxie said with a smile. 3,000 years. You've experienced 2 lives? This is not much. But in each life, your birth parents have always been exceptionally protective of you, right? Those few old people. Where are they now? Jun Moxie, you're impudent. Chu Wu Hui suddenly stood up and shouted angrily. Impudent? Looks like it's still not right. Then I'll change my question. Jun Moxie rubbed his chin and said, in these 3,000 years, you've had a father and mother, a lover, a wife and concubines. Then you can't possibly not have your own flesh and blood. Then you're still alive in this world, but your flesh and blood, where are they now? Jun Moxie smiled faintly and looked around. These 3 questions are also the questions that I'd like to ask everyone here at the same time. Everyone here, you've all lived for a few thousand years, right? Your parents, wives, family, children, are they still alive? This question was truly too hurtful. Other than these high-level cultivators, who else could live for 1,000 years, or even a few thousand years? Jun Mo Xie's actions were equivalent to tearing open their scars. Boom! All 10 of them stood up at the same time, their faces filled with rage. 10 abnormally powerful mental powers surged out, and this originally formless object seemed to have solidified, sending the straw hut flying into the sky. They were about to attack this disrespectful brat, Jun Moxie. What are all of you doing? All of you sit down. Wu Shan-Yun, who was sitting at the head, suddenly shouted. Do all of you know why Jun Moxie is asking these questions? Could it be that he wants to anger everyone in front of the 11 of us? Is he stupid? Why would he do such a suicidal thing? Can't all of you think about it? It's already been thousands of years. Are all of you still so impatient? Under his intimidating gaze, everyone sat down one by one. However, the way they looked at Jun Mo Xie was still rather unfriendly. If Jun Moxie couldn't come up with a reasonable excuse, they wouldn't let him walk out of this door. Jun Mo Xie sighed and put away his teasing attitude from before. Then, he said in a serious tone, I don't think anyone here is a heartless person. This can be seen from the fact that my words have touched everyone's hearts. No matter how profound your cultivation is, whether it's Shun Xian or the Holy Emperor, no matter how high, at the level of the 9 serenities and 14 masters, at the end of the day, we are still humans. Humans with flesh and blood. What we will never be able to give up is the kinship of the blood. I believe that no matter how many reincarnations we go through, as long as that memory remains, the separation of life and death that originated from our own emotions will always be the deepest scar in our hearts. Facing the enemy, it doesn't matter if 1,000 or 10,000 people die. But if it's our own people, we'll be sad for a long time. As for the parents who once raised us, they raised us from our youth, but when we grew up, they were already old. When we became sensible, they had already passed away. The tree longs for peace, but the wind doesn't stop. The child wants to be raised, but his parents don't wait for him. This is a scar that can never be healed. June Moxie said in a deep voice. His tone was slow and seemed to carry a kind of magical power. A faint sadness filled the air. As he spoke, all the top experts present couldn't help but think back to their own fathers and mothers. It was as if they could see their valiant and strong father who could lift them above his head and laugh. As he grew older, he slowly became senile, his hair turned white, and when he finally passed away quietly, he still looked at them with a deep sense of concern. And the warm embrace of a mother, the gentle smile and scolding. In the end, it all turned into a wisp of green smoke. Only the heart that was willing to give up everything for their children was everlasting and never extinguished. These memories were originally too long ago. But now that they suddenly thought of it, the warmth was still the same, and the helplessness and grief when they passed away were still heartbreaking. Especially these experts who were once the reincarnations of spirit seeds. In the beginning, they might have felt that they were not used to their childhood, or they were extremely resistant. But only they, from the day they were born, they remembered every scene. From resistance to acceptance, and even enjoyment. From the first time they pretended to be innocent to make their worried parents happy, they had already accepted it. Who didn't have those days? Those ordinary but warm days. Every night when they dreamed, who didn't stand on the rooftop and sigh at the sky? Thousands of twists and turns, all turned into a faint sigh. And the peerless beauty who fell in love with me in my youth. From a young and inexperienced girl, she became my companion for decades. She gave birth to my children, washed and cooked for me, accompanied me, and wanted to grow old with me. But in the end, she still gradually grew old in front of me. In the end, I couldn't do anything about it. Who has ever forgotten the oath of undying love? Who can truly forget the deep yearning that was once engraved in their bones? Who can truly forget the tender and affectionate entanglement? That shy smile, the happiness and satisfaction of being with you. The red veil on the night of the wedding. Your names, perhaps, can be forgotten, but your past experiences, can you really forget? When you dream at night, have you ever sighed softly? Have you ever regretted? Have you? 10 years of life and death, never to think, never to forget. 1,000 miles of lonely grave, desolation with no place to speak. Even if we meet, we shouldn't know each other. Face covered with dust, hair like frost. In the night comes a dream. Suddenly returning home, small window, dressing up, looking at each other without words, only 1,000 lines of tears, anticipating the heartbreak every year. Bright moon night, Short Pine Hill. June Moxie's eyes were misty. He slowly recited. For others, it's only 10 years. It's already unbearable. But for you, it's 1,000 years, or even longer. Everyone, do you still remember the 1,000 miles of lonely grave where your beloved was buried? Do you still remember the bright moon night, Short Pine Hill? At this moment, hearing these words, does your heart ache? Do you miss it? There was no need to ask right now. This group of peerless experts who stood at the peak of the continent, each and every one of their eyes had long lost the calmness, steadiness, sharpness, and murderous intent they once had, only leaving behind a deep yearning and sorrow. The beloved wife who once made a solemn pledge of undying love, vowed to live and die together, leaned against each other for all eternity, but in the end, helplessly passed away. The sweet smile that once resembled an apple, the beauty who would smooth the creases of his clothes every time he went out, the limpid eyes that would lean against the door every time he returned late at night. Beloved wife, even if it's reincarnation for all eternity, as long as I have the memory of you, how can I forget you? Do you know that every night when I toss and turn in bed, the softest and most painful part of my heart is only you? In a split second, these peerless experts who shook the heavens and earth, each and every one of them felt sorrow from the bottom of their hearts. The steady voice continued to be mixed with a unique magical power, slowly saying, "And the children that you once held in your arms countless times, The children that made you so happy on the day they were born, from learning to speak, to learning to walk, and then to growing into teenagers, young men. They are the crystallization of your blood and sweat. But in the end, they finally couldn't endure the years, and when they passed away peacefully in your arms, the kind of grief of the white-haired person sending off the black-haired person. Who can forget that? These unforgettable past events, who can really forget them? This last sentence, June Moxie suddenly shouted out, almost like a lion's roar. Sometimes it was like the evening drum or the morning bell. Sometimes it was like a thunderclap. Chapter 899. Still 2 chapters in 1. Love. I've used up all the chapters today. I'll have to pull an all-nighter again tonight. In an instant, everyone came back to their senses from the endless memories, only to find that many of them had tears streaming down their cheeks. Everyone present had profound cultivation and had lived for a long time. They had long forgotten the feeling of tears. Today, there were tears in their eyes again. It turned out that they hadn't really forgotten how to cry. The way they looked at June Moxie was a little complicated and a little strange. Everyone, the path of cultivation has always been difficult. It's nothing more than a battle with oneself, a battle with one's laziness, a battle with one's character, but most importantly, a battle with one's own feelings. June Moxie smiled and said, "It's hard to break through the barrier of love. It has always been the inner demon of cultivation. It's the biggest shackle. Since ancient times, countless heroes have fallen because of it. It doesn't mean that just because you've tasted the love between a man and a woman, you'll see through the barrier of love and cut it off. As long as love exists, it won't be seen through, let alone cut it off. Any one of you has lived for thousands of years and thought that you've already seen through love. But there will always be times when you'll unconsciously recall it. The longer you suppress it, the more painful it will be when you think about it. And the inner demon of cultivation will become more and more difficult to get through, especially when you're breaking through, or when you're going through the thunder tribulation. It'll be fatal. Everyone's faces were still wet with tears, but they were deep in thought. Part of your cultivation now is equivalent to cultivating the inner demon. The stronger you are, the stronger the inner demon will be. If you go on like this, you'll never be able to get rid of your inner demon. Sooner or later, my soul will be destroyed by the backlash of my inner demons." June Moxie said indifferently. "Then, how we get rid of the inner demon?" The first person on the right raised his head, tears still in his eyes. "This barrier of love. How we get rid of it?" This man was the closest to his wife in the past. When his beloved wife died, he almost gave up his long life to follow her. After so many years, every time he thought about it, he still brooded over it. He looked at June Moxie and said sadly, "If I have to erase her from my heart for love, then this old man would rather choose to have my soul destroyed." Everyone has their own ways to overcome the barrier of love. What is suitable for me may not be suitable for you. June Moxie smiled and said, "But to overcome this barrier of love is not to suppress and forget. So, let nature take its course. Let nature take its course." Everyone had a confused look on their faces. There was once a man who used tears to overcome the barrier of love. June Moxie said deeply, "Legend has it that even after he passed the thunder tribulation, his face still flowed with tears of longing for his wife. The depth of this man's feelings can be imagined. Overcome the barrier of love with tears." When everyone heard this, they all felt that it was inconceivable. But when he thought about it carefully, he felt that it made sense. But where exactly did it make sense? No one could tell. Everyone, I have a solemn message for all of you as repayment for the favor you have done for me today. June Moxie chuckled and said, "Later, I will need to take something from here. Please don't mind me. Don't mind me. If you need anything, no matter what you want, other than the exquisite lotus, I can only give you one stalk and not all of it. Feel free to take anything else." Everyone said in unison. They thought, what can this kid take away? I've already promised you the exquisite lotus, and there's nothing else good out there. Even if these treasures grow underground, you won't be able to take them away. So, I might as well be more generous. If that's the case, I really have to thank you." June Moxie smiled strangely and said, "Actually, this saying is the devil of love. Everyone has always been afraid of it, but from another perspective, the devil of the heart can be of help." The last sentence was said by June Moxie with a profound meaning. After he finished speaking, everyone started to ponder deeply. The devil of the heart can be of help. Everyone took a deep breath and furrowed their brows. It seemed as if they had grasped something, but at the same time, it seemed as if they had not grasped it. For a moment, their hearts were itching. Everyone's barrier of love is right in front of you. I believe that everyone will have their own understanding after this barrier of love. Just now, this kid was presumptuous and used a secret technique to infiltrate my voice, stirring up the feelings that have been buried for thousands of years. If I have offended you in any way, I hope that everyone will forgive me." June Moxie smiled and said slowly. June Moxie's face was somewhat pale. He had hypnotized so many experts at the same time. Although his mental strength had come from the support of the Hongjun Pagoda, he had still needed to expend a considerable amount of energy. "You're welcome, little friend June. Your words have helped us clear the fog of our predicament and pointed out a path for us. We can't even thank you enough, so why would we blame you? Furthermore, we also had the intention to cooperate. Otherwise, today we're reliving our thousands of years of friendship, and it's a mix of emotions. Looks like we need to go into seclusion for a few days." The first person on the right said. It was obvious that he was very grateful to June Moxie. The others also nodded their heads in acknowledgement. Their gazes became much gentler. "Many thanks," June Moxie said. "Since all of you seniors want to go into seclusion, then this junior will also want to obtain the exquisite lotus. After that, I will stay for another day and a half before leaving. No worries, as long as you like it. You can stay for a few more days." Guhan's voice carried a hint of a smile. "Little friend June, there's something that this old man would like to say to you." "Senior, please speak." "Little friend June, the three holy lands are enemies with you. They only have themselves to blame for this, and can't blame anyone else. If you want to take revenge, we won't shield you either. But I hope that young Master June will consider the fact that the Holy Lands have been protecting the continent for 10,000 years. If you can show mercy, please reconsider." Guhan's expression was heavy as he said with a sigh, "The enmity between the Holy Lands and me. I've never been a good person. The blood debt of the past, I'll definitely repay it." June Mo Xie chuckled. "No matter whose face it is, I've never shown mercy to those who deserve to be killed. This, I hope that Senior can forgive me." Facing the pleading of the #1 expert in the world, June Moxie did not give in at all. Guhan sighed deeply and did not mention this matter again. He only looked deeply at June Moxie and said, "Xiaoing, bring little friend June to retrieve the exquisite lotus. The few of us will not be going over. Pass down my orders. If little friend June has any other needs on this mountain, he can take it. No one is to stop him." After saying that, he turned to June Moxie. "If little friend June feels that this matter is over, you can leave on your own. This old man and the others were in a rush to enter seclusion. Please forgive us for our rudeness." "Senior, there's no need to be so polite," June Moxie hurriedly said. In his heart, he thought to himself, "Hurry up and go into closed-door cultivation. As long as you old bastards go into closed-door cultivation, no one will be able to stop me with your orders. At that time, won't I be able to take as many natural treasures as I want? Otherwise, this young master would only need to remind you with a single sentence. Why would I need to hypnotize all of you and force you to enter seclusion?" Without a doubt, this was the real reason why June Moxie had done so much. It was because of these heavenly treasures on Mount Heaven's Saint. Only here could there be treasures that could not be found anywhere else. One had to know that there were quite a number of medicinal herbs that June Moxie needed to advance to the 6th, 7th, and 8th level. These were all treasures that even the 9 Nether First Young Master did not manage to collect back then. This also proved that no matter how strong an individual was, it was still not as good as having a huge influence. The green light in June Moxie's eyes was practically about to make this entire mountain a cuckold, faced with such a huge amount of good stuff of such high quality. If it was you, would you not be anxious? June Moxie held his temper and bid farewell to the big shots cordially. He spoke with a smile and was courteous. After 8 or 9 people reluctantly bid farewell, and after agreeing to the requests of several guardians, it was finally over. June Moxie let out a long sigh and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Then he twisted his waist and shook his buttocks as he said in an indecent manner, F***CK, talking to these old men is really tiring. This young master almost suffered an internal injury. It's really killing me. Behind him, Chowing watched in astonishment as the previously modest and steady elegant young master suddenly turned into a ruffian in an instant. She couldn't help but widen her eyes and open her mouth. Pa, he actually has the nerve to mock us as being shameless. This brat is simply a two-faced man. He is both a god and a ghost. Where is your exquisite lotus? June Moxie asked impatiently. Follow me and you'll see it. Chowing rolled her eyes at him, took a deep breath, and turned her head to avoid looking at this face that could change in an instant. She resisted the urge to slap him in the face and walked ahead. June Moxie chuckled and followed behind her. He had to admit that there was a beautiful woman in front of him. Her figure was graceful and well-proportioned. She was simply too pleasing to the eye when she walked. The lingering fragrance lingered around June Moxie's nose, causing him to feel a little intoxicated in order to observe and admire her from all angles. June Moxie silently took a few steps behind and admired her in detail. The more he looked, the more he felt that this beautiful woman's figure was truly flawless. He couldn't help but praise her a few times before letting out a sigh. Such an extremely graceful and beautiful woman had actually been a woman for more than a year. It was truly a heavenly treasure. June Moxie let out a long sigh. That all-seeing eye, was it really that important? This silly lass, sacrificing over 1,000 years of her life so stupidly. Didn't she think that no one before her had the all-seeing eye? But didn't they still win the war for seizing the heavens? If someone was missing in this world, would the sun stop revolving? What a F***CK. Chow Ing, who was walking in front, heard June Moxie sighing behind her. Not knowing what he was worried about, she asked lightly, Young Master June is young and promising. Why are you still so melancholic? June Mo Sia looked at her slender waist and slender figure with a lustful gaze. Letting out a long sigh, he said, As long as the strange races are not exterminated, their ambitions will not die. The war for seizing the heavens is imminent. Thinking about how the world will be trampled by the strange races, I really feel that it's a pity, The last sentence was filled with pity, and he sighed from the bottom of his heart. Such a beauty is actually a pity, When Xiaoing heard this, her impression of him changed greatly. This evil monarch had indeed changed after coming to Mount Heaven Saint. She couldn't help but soften her tone. Young Master June, there's no need to worry. With the strength of young Master June's subordinates, Tian Fa's strength, and the Holy Lands, if we fight to the death, the continent might still have a chance. June Moxie sighed. It's difficult, It's easier said than done to change my perspective. Such a waste of resources is truly heart-wrenching. Unless what? Chowing felt as if her heart was about to explode with joy. For the war for seizing the heavens, she was willing to remain chaste for over 1,000 years, maintaining the all-seeing eye to deal with the strange races. As a woman, this sacrifice could be said to be extremely touching. She had long regarded the war for seizing the heavens as the only meaning of her life. Right now, the continent was on the decline, and with their current strength, they had more chances of winning than losing. She was burning with worry, and hearing the evil monarch's tone soften, she was extremely excited. If June Moxie was willing to participate in the war for seizing the heavens with his current strength, then this time they would definitely be able to win. Delighted, She immediately stopped in her tracks. Does young Master June have any conditions? Suddenly, she felt a weight on her back and a wave of warmth. A strong masculine scent instantly pressed against her body. It was June Moxie, who was in a daze. He only knew how to follow her mechanically. When she suddenly stopped, June Moxie did not notice anything and bumped into her. He only felt a soft and fragrant scent, and for some reason, he pressed his entire body against hers with such a convenient advantage, it would be a waste not to take advantage of it. Chowing gasped lightly, feeling her heart thumping wildly. Her beautiful face instantly turned red. For the sake of the all-seeing eye, she had come to Mount Heaven Saint when she was young and had never come into contact with a man like this before. At this moment, her heart was actually flustered. June Moxie squinted his eyes and let out a cry of surprise. His body seemed to have no bones as he leaned against her back and moaned. Why did you stop? As he said that, he even rubbed his face against her back. So comfortable. You quickly get up. Chowing only felt her entire body go limp, and she actually stood there in a daze. I can't get up. I don't know why, but all the bones in my body have suddenly gone soft. You quickly push me away. What are we doing like this? June Moxie moaned as he asked. At the same time, he shifted his center of gravity from his feet to his upper body, which was equivalent to covering Xiao-Ying. Xiao-Ying was embarrassed and angry at the same time. She didn't know where she got the strength from, but she dashed out with a whoosh. When she looked back, she saw that June Moxie's body was leaning more than 45 degrees forward, and he was strangely frozen there in a very difficult posture. He actually didn't fall. He was shameless. Before she could say the word shameless, she saw June Moxie straighten his body, and with a face full of lingering fear, he said, Mount Heaven Saint is indeed a magical place. When I just walked here, my body actually didn't listen to me. I almost damaged Mrs. Pure reputation. I really deserve to die 1,000 times. To be honest, this place is really magical. My mental fortitude is usually not bad, but just now I was so confused that I almost took off my pants. Xiao-Ying was speechless. She had seen shameless people before, but she had never seen or heard of such a shameless person. In terms of shamelessness, this guy in front of her could definitely be said to be unprecedented. He actually dared to say such shameless words in front of a young lady. Xiao-Ying stomped her feet and said, June Moxie, how could you do this? Mrs. Wright, I'm guilty. June Moxie used a pained and sincere attitude to admit his guilt and seriously reflected. No matter what the reason was, I shouldn't have leaned on Mrs. Body. Although Miss suddenly stopped, and it happened so suddenly that I didn't notice. But this isn't a reason. Definitely not. No matter what, today, I was like a hooligan. Sigh. I'm such a pure person, and I have such a pure body. Boo-hoo. Xiao-Ying almost fainted. What the hell was this guy saying? His words were originally inappropriate, but in the end, he actually said that she had tainted his pure and clean body. After reflecting for a while, June Moxie suddenly became more and more aggrieved, and with a choked voice, he said, You return me my innocence. Xiao-Ying's body swayed, and she suddenly regained her senses. She was instantly enraged. June Moxie, how long are you going to be unreasonable for? Cough, cough. June Dashao coughed and suddenly said with a serious expression, Miss, we're almost there, right? I know that the exquisite lotus is a treasure of the Holy Lands, but you can't just lead me around in circles. Who's leading you around in circles? Xiao-Ying was exasperated. It's right in front. Don't you have eyes? As she said that, she pointed forward. How dare you doubt this lady's credibility? This is simply intolerable. Xiao-Ying was very angry, but she didn't realize that after being interrupted by this guy, she actually forgot that this brat had taken advantage of her, and she still wanted to settle the score with him. It's right in front. June Moxie shouted in joy as he rushed forward. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, How beautiful! Right in front of them, amidst the spiritual mist, a pond that was only a few zhong wide appeared in front of them. The water was so clear that one could see the bottom. Looking at it with the naked eye, it was actually emitting a faint glow, as though there was a sacred halo above the pond. When he got closer, he realized that there were countless white things in the water covering the entire pond. In the center of the pond, there were 7 to 8 small leaves floating. These leaves were colorless, and if one didn't look closely, one wouldn't be able to see them. A thin, transparent, vine-like object was supporting the leaves to float on the surface of the water. Other than that, there was nothing else. Miss, don't play with me. This is the exquisite lotus? Jun Mo Xie pointed at the transparent leaves and turned around in astonishment. His face was full of disbelief. Yes, this is the sacred object of the Holy Lands. Xiao Ying's face was solemn as she looked at the leaves in the pond lovingly. 9 Revolution Exquisite Lotus. F*CK. Jun Moxie was a little indignant, and his fingers trembled. Just this lousy thing. Even if it bears an exquisite lotus root, how big can it be? Aren't you F*King playing with me? I have more than 10 people waiting to eat it. More than 10 people waiting to eat it. Xiao Ying acted as though she was about to faint. Then you can wait for another few thousand years. The 9 Revolution Exquisite Lotus only bears fruit once every 500 years, and each exquisite lotus can only bear a single lotus root. Jun Moxie acted as though he was about to faint. Right now, he really wanted to smash his head against the ground. After calming himself down, he asked with hope, "Then, how many people can eat the lotus root that bears fruit once?" "Only enough for one person to eat once." Xiao Ying looked at Jun Moxie as though she was watching a good show. "That can't be right. This is a lotus root, my God. Even if it's cut into pieces, it should at least be a few pieces, right? Only enough for one person? What kind of joke is that? What kind of joke is that? Do you think such a finger-sized lotus root can bear a few feet long?" Xiao Ying looked at Jun Moxie as though she was looking at an idiot. "You want to cut it? Only the size of a grain of rice." "How are you going to cut it?" "Only the size of a grain of rice." Jun Moxie was in despair and said angrily, "What use is this thing that's even smaller than a mosquito's penis? And your Heaven Saint Palace actually treats it like a treasure? Don't you feel ashamed? Why not just dig it all out? How dare you?" Xiao Ying was shocked, and her voice became sharp. "This is the treasure of the Heaven Saint Palace. This is a matter of life and death. If you dare to make a move, I can guarantee that no one from a Jun family in the Tian Fa forest will be left alive." Jun Moxie's previous words were originally a joke, and he didn't take it seriously. But when Xiao Ying said those words, it touched Jun Moxie's reverse scale and triggered his greatest rebellion. He suddenly turned around and looked at Xiao Ying with a sharp gaze. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm speaking the truth." Xiao Ying was shocked. Being stared at by his sharp gaze, she suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Her tone instantly softened as she said, "But the 9 Revolutions Exquisite Lotus is the treasure of the Heaven Saint Palace. Even if the entire Heaven Saint Palace is gone, the exquisite lotus cannot be lost. Young Master Jun, you should know the importance of the exquisite lotus now that I've said it like this, right? You can say it like this, but please remember, no matter when, it's best not to try to threaten me. Especially," Jun Moxie's tone became heavier as he said gloomily, "using my family to threaten me. I will never accept threats, because I will do my best to nip all possible harm in the bud. Even if it's a peerless beauty, it's no exception. I will never have tender and protective feelings for the fair sex." As he said this, Jun Moxie looked deeply into Xiao Ying's eyes. A sense of extreme danger rose in Xiao Ying's heart. In front of a junior like Jun Moxie, whose cultivation was far lower than hers, Xiao Ying actually felt as if a mountain was pressing down on her. She couldn't help but take a step back in horror. Chapter 900. At this moment, Jun Moxie's gaze was like that of a high and mighty monarch, ruling over her own fate. It made her feel that she couldn't resist, and she couldn't resist it. "Speak. I'm taking all of these exquisite lotuses. Just say the word." Jun Moxie created an oppressive feeling as he hurriedly chased after her. He couldn't help but be anxious. There were many people in the family who were waiting for this exquisite lotus. If it only grew once every 500 years, then it would be too late. If he brought it back, not only would he not be able to achieve his goal, it would even incite conflict. Just one. Who should he give it to? He immediately changed the topic from decisive killing to this aspect, not giving Xiao any time to react. Although this was somewhat despicable, Junimo Xie couldn't care less for the sake of his own happiness and sexual bliss. All right. No. Xiaoing almost agreed in shock. Young Master Jun, you must be a man of your words. We've already agreed on one stock, so you can't take more than that. This is a matter of principle. There's no room for compromise. She paused for a moment before continuing. Furthermore, our Heaven Saint Palace has only managed to grow from one stalk to 8 in the past 10,000 years. It can be seen how difficult it is to nurture. To be honest, it's a waste to give you just one stalk. You don't know how to nurture it, how to care for it, what it needs, what it hates. If you can't do any of these, it will wither instantly. I'm not trying to scare you. I'd like to hear the details. Junimo Xie took advantage of the opportunity and immediately became very receptive. He put on a posture of listening attentively. You really are a scoundrel. Xiaoing shook her head helplessly, but she still explained carefully. For this exquisite lotus, firstly, it must have natural clean water. It's best if it's formed from spiritual energy. Then, it must be in a place with rich spiritual energy. Only then can it guarantee its basic survival conditions. Jun Moxie made a no sound as he thought about it. This wasn't a problem at all. The spiritual energy at this daddy's place was even better than here. With so many spiritual herbs flourishing in there, he didn't believe that he couldn't nurture a stalk of exquisite lotus. Secondly, did you notice this pond? Just this pool alone required 30,000 pieces of Xiantian spiritual jades. With the addition of the warm and cold elements, the temperature had reached an absolute balance. These Xiantian spiritual jades were made up of almost all the spiritual jades in the world. Even a misty mansion had contributed a portion of them to make up for this amount. This is a huge sum of wealth that no one can afford, and only by doing so can the exquisite lotus grow slowly. 30,000 pieces of primordial spiritual jade. Jun Moxie clicked his tongue. Not to mention 30,000, he didn't even have a single piece. He couldn't help but think to himself, damn it, if it doesn't work, I'll just move the entire pool away. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Can a 10,000-year warm, soft jade replace the innate spiritual jade? 10,000-year-old warm, soft jade. It only has the effect of softening, but not the effect of coldness. Although its value isn't inferior to innate spiritual jades, it's not enough to nurture the exquisite lotus. Xiaoing looked at him in astonishment, as if she was doubtful that he could possess such a good item. How troublesome. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows and narrowed his eyes. If there's a heaven and earth spiritual vein, I wonder what will happen. What kind of joke is that? Xiaoing couldn't help but chuckle. Using a heaven and earth spiritual vein to nurture the exquisite lotus will naturally be more effective than using innate spiritual jades. Furthermore, it can greatly accelerate the growth of the exquisite lotus, shortening the time it takes for it to mature. If there's a heaven and earth spiritual vein, as long as spiritual energy turns into water, forming a pond on top of the spiritual vein, the exquisite lotus will grow several times faster, and there will be miraculous effects. But that thing has always existed in the legends, and it's located deep underground. Furthermore, as the continent changes, there will be spiritual energy turbulence, and it will move randomly. Who will be able to discover it? Xiao uncurled her lips, showing disdain towards Jun Moxie's wild imagination. Even if we know that there's a heaven and earth spiritual vein here, who would be able to obtain it? Move a huge mountain? Take out a complete spiritual vein? That's simply unrealistic. Jun Moxie let out a long sigh. This is really depressing. But in his heart, he was almost jumping up and down. Damn it, I have it. And it's a top-grade one that's hundreds of thousands of years old. The third growth requirement is Jun Moxie didn't hear a single word that Xiao Ying said after that. He was so excited that he couldn't control himself, and his mind was filled with thoughts on how to complete this task. However, even though his heart was bursting with joy, he still had to pretend to be at a loss on the surface. It was indeed a very difficult task. Fortunately, Jun Daxiao was well-trained, so he was able to put on a flawless performance. On the surface, he looked like he was grieving the death of his parents, but on the inside, he was overjoyed. Compared to a heaven and earth spiritual vein, these cultivation methods were nothing. Jun Moxie secretly calculated in his heart. The heaven and earth spiritual vein in his hand was probably enough to create a small to medium-sized lotus pond. At the very least, it would not be a problem to create one that was 7 to 8 times bigger than the one in front of him. Then, how many seeds of the exquisite lotus do you have? Can I bring back a whole stalk of exquisite lotus and bring back a few seeds? Jun Moxie put on the lowest posture and looked at Xiao Ying with a pitiful gaze. Even if it's just a tiny bit of hope, it's still better than nothing. Big Sister Xiao, you have to fulfill this small wish of mine. This kind of gaze made Xiao Ying feel that if she didn't give it to him, it would be an utterly heartless and cruel thing to do. When the exquisite lotus bears a jade root every 500 years, there will always be a few seeds on each stalk. All these years, there have been seeds, and I've accumulated quite a lot of them. However, the difficulty of cultivating them is tens of times harder than cultivating the exquisite lotus directly. Xiao Ying said awkwardly, "If I give it to you, you won't be able to cultivate it, and it would be a waste of such a treasure." It's fine, I'm just trying," Jun Moxie hurriedly said fervently. "Moreover, I don't need too many, just give me 100 or so, and I'll be satisfied." 100 or so? Xiao Ying's beautiful eyes widened in shock. The entire Heaven Saint Palace has only accumulated 50 to 60 seeds in the past thousands of years, and you actually want 100 of them? You really dare to ask for it? I'll just take 50. Jun Moxie chuckled and put on an innocent expression as he said, "Anyway, you already have so many that have matured." "No." Xiao Ying rejected him decisively, and after thinking for a long time, she said, "At most, I'll give you 5. That's already beyond the limits of my abilities." "Big sister, you're really asking for sky-high prices, ah? 5, how dare you say that?" Jun Moxie cried out. "Just now, Wu Shanyan said that whatever I want, as long as it's not a matured, exquisite lotus, I want you to open the door for me. You can't be so stingy, can you? 8. Too little. At least 40. Jun Moxie, you're really being unreasonable. 10. I can't go any higher. 30. This is also my final asking price. If it's lower than this, I feel that this trip is completely meaningless. Furthermore, Wu Shanyan's words are completely useless. To think that I've pointed out the right path for you and helped you so much, but you're not even willing to give me such a small amount of things. How can you be like this? How can you be so shameless? How can you bear to do this?" After a round of intense bargaining, how could Xiao Ying win against Jun Daxiao's battle of words? In the end, the price was set at 20, and Jun Moxie heaved a sigh of relief. Actually, his best plan was to get 10 or so, and it would already be very good. To be able to get 20 was truly a pleasant surprise. Xiao Ying's beautiful face was bitter, and she felt her mind going blank. Why did she keep retreating in such a muddle-headed manner? And she actually agreed to 20. Did she really say that out loud? What she didn't know was that although she was old, she didn't have much contact with the secular world, and her social experience was pitifully little. Secondly, if Jun Moxie claimed to be second in the world with his sharp tongue, then no one would dare to claim to be first. Most importantly, there was the third point. During the negotiation, Jun Daxiao faintly used the power of bewitchment. In order to prevent Xiao Ying from noticing, Jun Moxie only lightly affected her. However, the two of them were arguing fiercely, and no matter how careful Xiao Ying was, she didn't notice it at all. Thus, this scoundrel easily achieved his goal. Right now, This slut was feeling very pleased with himself. As expected, big breasts and no brains. I can see that this girl's breasts aren't small. It seems like one hand isn't enough to cover them, and at least two hands are needed to grasp them. As for the extent of the grasp, I'll have to personally measure it to be more certain. In the excitement of achieving his goal, Jun Daxiao almost used his hands to measure the size of Qiao Ying's breasts. Luckily, he didn't really do it. If he really did, Great Beauty Qiao would probably break her promise on the spot and give this scoundrel a good beating. Since the negotiation was settled, the next step was the handover of the exquisite lotus. Qiao Ying returned to her residence and took out 20 seeds for Jun Moxie. However, she was still hesitant about how to transplant the exquisite lotus. Jun Moxie, how are you going to bring it away? Dig it out for me. I naturally have a way to bring it away. Jun Moxie replied without raising his head. Qiao Ying was infuriated. This guy really knew how to tear down the bridge after crossing it. They hadn't even crossed the river yet, and he was already so eager to tear down the bridge in a fit of anger. She wanted to pull it out and throw it at him. However, she still felt a little embarrassed. Not only could she not do such a thing, she had served the exquisite lotus for so many years, and they already had deep feelings for each other. If she caused the exquisite lotus to wither and die because of her, Qiao Ying would never forgive herself. After thinking for a long time, she still gently dug out a stalk with a large piece of white jade. Then, she placed it into a small spiritual jade box and filled it with spiritual energy water. She solemnly handed it over to Jun Moxie. Chapter 901. Today, it's still 2 chapters in 1. Qiao Ying said solemnly, Jun Moxie, don't talk nonsense with me. I'm begging you seriously, you must take good care of it. Even if you don't know how to nurture it, and just let it stay in this box. As long as it's placed in a place with abundant spirit qi, it will still have vitality. If it really can't be nurtured, just send it back to me, okay? When she said the last sentence, Qiao Ying actually had a pleading tone. This kind of attitude was like a mother sending off her beloved daughter to get married. Jun Moxie could feel her wholehearted sincerity, and his expression turned serious as he received it with both hands and said in a promising tone, Don't worry, the next time you see it, I guarantee that it will be much better than it is now. The small transparent leaves of the exquisite lotus in his hands swayed lightly, as if it was saying goodbye to Qiao Ying. Qiao Ying's heart ached, and tears actually flowed down her cheeks. Jun Moxie had noticed that the water in the pond had sunk a little after he had scooped it out. It was as if an invisible bowl had been placed on top of it, and the water had sunk in. However, the water around it hadn't rippled at all. After a long while, the water's surface finally regained its calmness. It's actually almost a solid spirit liquid. Jun Moxie felt a little unbalanced in his heart. From the looks of it, this thing was also a good thing. There was a good thing, and it was from the 3 holy lands. Why should he let them enjoy it alone? That was practically a crime, Right now, with only Qiao Ying by his side, it was a heaven-sent opportunity, It would be a waste not to take it. This kind of advantage, it would be a waste not to take it, So Jun Moxie's eyes turned, and he calmly raised his head, looking into the distance. The spirit qi here is really enviable. Look over there, it's actually like a thick fog. To be able to cultivate in such a place. TSK, your heaven-sent palace is really something I can only look up to, Qiao Ying subconsciously turned to look in the direction he was looking at, and she could not help but give a light laugh as she said, Young Master Jun has made an error of judgment this time. That is not heaven and earth spiritual qi, but the fog of dusk. The sky is already turning dark. Jun Moxie took advantage of the time when she turned her head to secretly activate the Hongjun Pagoda, activating the power of water. With a whoosh, a third of the spiritual qi water in the pool had already disappeared without a sound. With an embarrassed look on his face, he scratched his head and rubbed his nose in embarrassment. He chuckled and said, Is this true? I actually misjudged you. He laughed in embarrassment. Qiao Ying smiled faintly, understanding his awkwardness. She was too embarrassed to say anything else, but her heart skipped a beat. So this young man still has many of the habits of a young man. Speaking of which, the way he smiled bashfully just now was really pretty. June Moxie was very satisfied with stealing something, and his heart was filled with joy. Only now did he start to inspect the exquisite lotus in his hands. He looked at the small plant in his hands with great care. He looked at the countless roots that were as thin as gossamer under the platycodon, and at the center there was a tender jade lotus. This jade lotus was simply pitifully small. It was at most the size of a peanut, and it did not have any special fragrance. But when he held it in his hands, he naturally felt very comfortable. With a flick of his wrist, the exquisite lotus disappeared from June Moxie's hands. He had already entered the space of the Hongjun Pagoda. Under Qiao Ying's shocked gaze, June Moxie shrugged his shoulders with an innocent look on his face. Blinking his eyes, he said, "It's a secret." Qiao Ying snorted, but she was somewhat relieved in her heart. June Moxie had countless mysterious methods. Perhaps he really could nourish the exquisite lotus. Following that, June Moxie truly began to use his connections to intimidate others. Because he had the promise of Wu Shan-yun and the others, the spirit herbs on Mount Heaven Saint were practically free for him to take. And this fellow was not someone who knew how to be polite. In his heart, he thought that perhaps this was the only time he would come here in his life. If he didn't plunder as much as he could, then when would he wait? Furthermore, he had a treasure like the Hongjun Pagoda that could store the entire world, and it might not be able to fill it up. Without any worries, he naturally opened his eyes as wide as possible. Among the spirit herbs and heavenly treasures on Mount Heaven Saint, he specially picked the older ones, including the Xianling wood. He did not let any of them go. All the spirit herbs and heavenly treasures on Mount Heaven Saint were hung with a small red cloth. Wu Shan-yun had agreed to his request because this fellow had come empty-handed. Even if he donated a few sacks to him, how much could he carry? So he was just pretending to be generous. If Wu Shan-yun knew that June Moxie actually had such a perverted treasure that could store an unlimited amount of spirit herbs, he would definitely not agree even if he broke his head. Even if he agreed, he would definitely go back on his word. So now, June Moxie only had to choose. He only needed to tie the red cloth around the spirit herbs and mark them. When he left, he would store them all away. One thing was for sure. After June Moxie left this time, Wu Shan-yun would definitely vomit blood. The people on the mountain allowed him to do as he pleased. They thought to themselves, this tree is tens of thousands of years old and has deep roots. Who knows how deep it goes into the mountain? You want it? That's a good idea, but can you move it away? Those spirit herbs are also all rooted in the ground. If you want to dig them out, you will need to be extremely careful. How can it be obtained just because you want it? Was this little guy indulging in wild fantasies? So what if you tie the red cloth around it? This thing is still growing on Mount Heaven Saint. Not to mention a piece of cloth. Even if you tied the entire tree with red cloth, it would be like a blind man trying to light a lamp. It would be a waste of candle wax. June Moxie busied himself for 2 days. Every day, there would be people watching coldly from the side. Seeing this idiot busy himself, they would never get tired of it. They would just treat it as watching a show. Occasionally, someone would ask jokingly, "June brat, how many have you picked?" Every time this happened, June Moxie would always reveal a simple and honest smile and reply, "I picked a lot. There's so many good things here. Take as much as you want. Don't stand on ceremony. Take as much as you can. It would be a waste if you keep it." June Moxie would scratch his head and say innocently, "If I take it away, it would be equivalent to tearing down many of your houses. Are you guys really not worried? Take it away. You really know how to joke." This person would then smile and say, "If you can take it away, I will do this and that." Then they would make another bet. 2 days later, early in the morning, June Moxie began his grand relocation plan. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, everyone on Mount Heaven Saint was completely dumbfounded. My heavens, June Moxie came out of his temporary room and solemnly bade farewell. Apart from a few people who were in seclusion, almost everyone else came out to send him off. Everyone wanted to see the helpless and comical look of this brat. It had been a long time since there was such a joyous event on Mount Heaven Saint. Thinking about how June Moxie would only take away one or two unimportant stalks with a bitter face, everyone felt as if their stomachs were going to hurt from laughing so hard. This was truly a good show. Thinking about how the evil monarch who had lost the face of the three Holy Lands in the pugilistic world had suffered such a big loss in the Holy Lands, everyone felt extremely happy. Seniors, this June is extremely grateful for your hospitality these past few days. I will be taking my leave today. June Moxie said politely. A warm and sincere smile hung on his face. Young Master June is too courteous. Come and play often when you're free. Everyone laughed heartily, a meaningful smile on their faces. Senior Wu Shanyan had once said that on this Mount Heaven Saint, as long as it's something that I, June Moxie, fancy, no matter how many, no matter what, I can take it as I please. Since that's the case, I won't stand on ceremony then. June Moxie seemed to be afraid that everyone would forget Wu Shanyan's promise. So he used a tone as if he was measuring the heart of a gentleman with a yardstick of a petty person. Don't stand on ceremony. Since boss has promised you, it's fine even if you want to move the entire Mount Heaven Saint away. All the experts encouraged him generously. June Moxie smiled shyly and said with relief, Seniors are really too courteous. In these few days, I've picked out quite a number of good things, and my harvest is truly plentiful. If I succeed in the future, I'll have to thank all the seniors for your generosity today. Everyone smiled lightly and hurriedly said, Don't stand on ceremony. Take whatever you want. Take whatever you should take. Don't stand on ceremony. All of them smiled until their mouths were crooked and their shoulders were twitching. June Moxie rubbed his palms together and said happily, The experts of the Holy Lands are indeed magnanimous. Wow, I'm going to be rich this time, ha. Everyone laughed heartily at the same time. For a moment, they were all laughing and joking, as if they were organizing a banquet. Everyone was very happy. Just when everyone was waiting anxiously, the voice that they had been waiting for came as expected. This is too bad. I forgot. I picked out so many things. With my strength alone, how can I take them all away? I'm going to die of anger. I'm going to die of anger. In the ears of these old farts, this voice was even more satisfying than a traveler who had been thirsty for a long time in the summer, suddenly eating a cup of bone-chilling ice cream. This little idiot has finally realized his mistake. How delightful! Looking at the bitter expression on June Moxie's face as he stomped his feet anxiously, everyone rejoiced in his misfortune. They were smiling so widely that their eyes couldn't even be seen anymore. Only Xiao Ying was frowning at the side, looking at June Moxie with some worry. She knew that June Moxie had a mysterious ability to make things disappear. However, she didn't know how strong June Moxie's ability was and whether he could store all these things. Looking at the spirit herbs and trees that were tied with red cloth, Xiao Ying sighed in her heart. If June Moxie can really take them away, the Mount Heaven Saint will suffer great loss. Also, she was worried for June Moxie. If he can't take them away, you look like an extremely intelligent person. Could it be that the spirit herbs in front of you really made you dizzy? You actually didn't consider whether you can take them away. Now that you've made such a big fool of yourself, you must be feeling very embarrassed. June Moxie sighed, as if he was so melancholic that he was about to hang himself. Suddenly, he turned his head and asked with a glimmer of hope, Seniors, if I leave them here first, after I go down the mountain, I'll immediately send someone to take them away. What do you think? That won't do. Boss has instructed us to only do this once, and not a second time. Furthermore, only you can take them away. You can't ask for help. Besides, Mount Heaven Saint is such a sacred place. How can we allow a bunch of ordinary people to come and go? Wouldn't that be too disgraceful? All the old men shook their heads like a rattle drum. What a joke. We finally get to have some fun. If you do that, won't all of us have nothing to eat? You're dreaming. You actually want to empty the Mount Heaven Saint in one go. How can there be such a wonderful thing? June Moxie was a little anxious. His eyes were red as he said hysterically, This won't do. That won't do. Am I supposed to just stand and watch? I originally planned to take a little of each type to preserve some spiritual energy for this unworldly land. Seniors, if you anger me, don't blame me for taking all of them away in one go." An old man with 2 tufts of mustache sneered and said, "June Moxie, as long as you have the ability, you can take whatever you want. We won't stop you." "Why? You want to act shamelessly just because you can't take them away? Are you the one who said that? If I really take away all of them, don't be angry. Don't find any excuses to deal with my family and friends." June Moxie said fiercely. "Ha ha ha." Dozens of people laughed together. "June Moxie, what kind of people do you think we are? This old man and the others have been famous in the pugilistic world since 1,000 years ago. We've always kept our words. There's no reason for us to go back on our words. Up until now, we've been famous in the continent for 1,000 years. How can we be people who go back on their words?" "Good." June Moxie looked like he was really forced to the edge of the cliff. He wanted to stake everything on one throw. "Although this method will hurt my vitality, you forced me to do it. A man fights for his pride, and a Buddha fights for his incense. If I don't take them away, you'll look down on me. If you have the ability, just use it." June Moxie, this old man and the others have to remind you that if you go down this mountain today, you won't be able to come up here by yourself in the future. Don't talk about sending people here. Everyone looked at June Moxie's flushed face. They all thought that he was bluffing. They couldn't help but despise him in their hearts. June Moxie was enraged. Suddenly, he lowered his waist into a horse stance and slowly stretched out both his hands. His face was flushed red, and his eyes were filled with anger. He reached out and grabbed a thick Xianling wood beside him and roared with all his might, "Go!" As soon as he finished speaking, there was a soft bang, and the profound spirit would suddenly and strangely disappeared. Everyone was dumbfounded. How could such a big tree disappear? That was really strange. June Moxie sat down on the ground and gasped for breath. It could be seen that he had consumed too much of his strength after using this strange method. But there was a kind of hysterical brilliance in his eyes. It seemed that he was willing to pay any price to take away these things. This method was definitely a method that consumed his vitality. Otherwise, why would June Moxie's expression be so ugly? Just taking away one was almost enough to take away half of his life. It was obvious that it wasn't just a matter of taking away these elixirs. It was a matter of face. It was obvious that June Moxie was a person who valued face and disregarded everything else. So, no matter what, he would take away these elixirs even if he had to risk his life today. June Moxie was already so tired after just taking away one tree. One could imagine how much June Moxie would have to pay if they took away all the elixirs with the red cloth tied on them. Would he die of exhaustion because of this? All of a sudden, the old man felt a little ashamed. Do we force him too much? June Moxie panted a few times and walked up again. Again, he did the same thing. With a poof, another huge Xianling would disappeared. June Moxie's face had turned blood red this time. But he didn't rest. Instead, he staggered a few steps and walked towards another tree. The 3 trees disappeared, and with a boom, the thatched hut collapsed. June Moxie roared at the top of his lungs a few more times, and the spirit herbs and vines surrounding the thatched cottage disappeared as well. This. Everyone was stunned. June Moxie spun around like he was drunk. He sat down and waved his hand. He said resolutely, "Don't try to persuade me. Today I must take these away. Damn it, I can't take this lying down no matter what. I, June Moxie, have never been looked down upon like this in my life." Everyone was speechless. Who's interested in persuading you? It's better if you die of exhaustion. You're already unable to hold on with just this much. If humph. June Moxie's footsteps were staggering as he passed one tree after another. His complexion was getting more and more unsightly with each passing moment. It seemed as if he was going to collapse the next second, but he didn't collapse. Everyone followed him and watched in a daze. Trees disappeared one after another. Houses were demolished one after another. On Mount Heaven Saint, dust filled the sky. June Moxie staggered forward with difficulty. He was laughing so hard that his stomach was cramping. This is too satisfying. What a great harvest. 1 tree, 2 trees, 3 trees, 4 trees, 70 trees, 90 trees. Wahaha. How could June Moxie not know that he had gone a little overboard? The spiritual herbs on Mount Heaven Saint had been accumulated over 10,000 years. Even with Wu Shanyan's promise, it wasn't a guaranteed thing. Once he incurred the wrath of the masses, his plan would fail on the verge of success. But these things were where they lived. If he wanted to take them away, silently, in front of so many peerless experts, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. Furthermore, even if he took them away, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't take revenge. June Moxie and Mei Shuiyan might not be afraid of their revenge, but that didn't mean that the others weren't either. Therefore, June Moxie's act wasn't just to tease them. Firstly, he wanted them to watch. Even if they tried to stop him midway, then he would have already taken half of it. They could only suffer in silence. The second was when they realized that they had fallen into the trap, they would realize that they had been tricked by him. But he had said that they were not allowed to take revenge. This was tantamount to putting all the trouble on him. With the arrogance of these people, they would only take revenge on him and not kill the innocent. The more ruthlessly June Moxie teased them, the more they wouldn't lay their hands on others before dealing with June Moxie. And June Moxie was the one who was least afraid of their revenge. If he really couldn't do it, he could hide in the Hongjun Pagoda. Even the gods wouldn't be able to find him. This plundering was equivalent to collecting more than 90% of all the ingredients for refining pills. And these were all alive. In the Hongjun Pagoda, there was thousands of times more spiritual energy than the outside world. The environment was dozens of times better, so their growth would be extremely fast. This meant that they would have an endless supply of resources in the future, great profits without any capital. The only thing he would lose would be his face. But since when did this young master care about face? Under the watchful eyes of everyone, June Moxie had already collected more than 80% of the ingredients. Finally, the experts of the Holy Mountain felt that something was wrong. F***CK. This brat had already torn down more than half of the house. All the hundreds of the oldest elixirs had disappeared. This brat, his half-dead appearance had never changed. This isn't he playing with us? Stop! A white-haired old man shouted. His face was as cold as frost. June Moxie, is it fun to play with us like this? The 10,000 years of accumulation of Mount Heaven Saint is going to be destroyed in your hands. June Moxie, you've gone too far. Stop what you're doing right now and hand over the things you've taken. The moment he said that, the originally puzzled and shocked crowd immediately came to their senses. They all looked at June Moxie angrily. Hand it over. June Moxie panted and straightened his back. Brother, you're not joking, right? This is your promise. Even if I have to move the entire Mount Heaven Saint away, it doesn't matter. This is your promise, right? And now you're going back on your word? Can you not be so shameless? All the elixirs had already been collected. Seeing that the other party wanted to break their promise, June Moxie did not even address them as senior, directly calling them brother. Everyone's faces turned red. That was what they said, but who would have thought that this brat was so abnormal? Since ancient times, who had ever seen someone collect things like this? Mother Kerr, this brat is really too sinister. Humph. We only promised you a portion. Who said that you could take everything? Could it be that even a joke can be taken seriously? The old man's face turned purple as he argued. We even said that we would go to the 9 heavens to pluck the moon. But is that even possible? But I did it. June Moxie narrowed his eyes. So you're prepared to shed all pretense of cordiality and be shameless? It's understandable if the 3 holy lands are like this. After all, they're a bunch of hypocrites. But your Heaven Saint Palace is actually playing this kind of shady business. This young master is really astonished. To think that a person's skin can be so thick to this extent. June Moxie, don't try to win with words. Do you think that with so many of us here, you'll be able to leave? That old man snorted and said, A wise man should know his place. Put the things down. We naturally won't let you suffer a loss. You can take away a portion, but you can't take everything away. Tung Chongjia, that's not good, right? Xiao Ying furrowed her brows and said, I'm also very angry that Jun Moxie was able to destroy the Heaven Saint Palace to such a state. But this was after all agreed upon by everyone. Now that he's done it, you're going back on your words. Isn't this too disgraceful? If news of this gets out, where will the Heaven Saint Palace's face go? This matter has nothing to do with the Heaven Saint Palace. It was this old man who broke his promise. The old man's face twitched, but he gritted his teeth and said, if we really let him take everything away, the Heaven Saint Palace's vitality will not be able to recover for thousands of years. This old man can't bear that kind of responsibility, and neither can you. How unlucky. My laptop directly crashed, and even after hiring a few people, they couldn't fix it. Last night, my flight was even delayed by an hour, and I only arrived at Jin at 2 a.m. I stayed at the airport hotel with Skyscraper, and then I started to work overtime. By 5:30 a.m., I managed to finish the manuscript, and then I tragically discovered that the hotel's internet was not working. The service desk said that the internet was broken, and they were currently repairing it, but they would have to wait until 1 p.m. But I have to check out at 1 p.m., and if I don't check out, I'll have to wait another day. Oh my God, Skyscraper was even more tragic. I lost my laptop's charger in Nanning. Now, I've come to the airport and found a coffee shop to upload. I'm really in a terrible fix. Chapter 902. But this is not a reason to be despicable and shameless. Xiao Ying was so angry that her face turned red. Since you can't afford to take responsibility, then you shouldn't be boasting and boasting. Why didn't I see you guys stop when you were making bets, watching the show, and gloating? Now you know that you can't bear to? Afraid? Xiao Ying, don't you know that this matter is no longer a matter of whether or not an individual is afraid? This matter concerns the future of the entire Heaven Saint Palace. And no matter what, the root of this matter is Jun Moxie, that brat, being despicable and shameless first. He had long planned this, and made all sorts of false appearances to lure this old man into making a wrong judgment. Tung Chongjia said loudly, he played us like this. This old man must seek justice no matter what. Even if I have to break my promise, I will not hesitate. His face was red as he said heavily, besides, this matter has already turned into a personal grudge between me and Jun Moxie. It has nothing to do with the Heaven Saint Palace. Xiao Ying, if you still admit that you are a part of the Heaven Saint Palace, please don't speak anymore. In order to wash away this personal grudge, even if I have to lower my status and bear the stigma of bullying the weak, I can't care anymore. Xiao Ying was angered to the point that her eyes were wide open, and she was almost speechless. Ha ha! Jun Moxie suddenly laughed loudly. Personal grudge. What you said is really moving. I finally understand where the three holy lands' shamelessness comes from. So that's how it is. In the end, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. So what if you're an expert above the level of the Holy Emperor? Tung Chongjia, you really have a good mouth, huh? I, Jun Moxie, have really broadened my horizons today. No matter what, if you are not willing to leave behind the treasures of this mountain today, and do not give us an explanation, you can forget about leaving this Heaven Saint Mountain alive. Not only Tung Chongjia, everyone else also took a step forward and locked their auras onto Jun Moxie, glaring at him fiercely. The situation in front of them had already entered a dangerous situation. Let's see who dares to make a move. Xiao Ying floated in front of Jun Moxie and blocked his way. She was so angry that her face was red. Her heart ached, she was angry, and she was ashamed. He felt heartache for the loss of so many elixirs, but he was even angrier at the shamelessness of his own people. Who would have thought that a group of hermits on Mount Heaven Saint, who were all peak experts of the current era, would actually do such a despicable thing? It was one thing for him to go back on his words and go back on his words, but he actually wanted to use force to bully the weak. As for Jun Moxie, although he was in the right, he actually schemed to take away so many things at once. He was indeed a little too greedy, but since he had agreed, he could not go back on his word. He should not go back on his word. If a man does not keep his word, how can he stand between heaven and earth? Huh? June Moxie smiled and pushed Xiaoing away. He shook his head and said, "You'd better not get involved in this. After all, you are a guest of the Heaven Saint Palace." As he spoke, he looked at the 40 to 50 people in front of him and said calmly, "Now that things have come to this, there's really no turning back. Your actions have really disappointed me. June Moxie, would never have thought that a person's face is actually so worthless. I thought that the legendary Heaven Saint Palace would be somewhat different. Even if you don't agree to let me take away the elixirs, you wouldn't be so despicable. But it turns out that you are just jackals of the same tribe." June Dashao paused for a while and said mockingly, "Although I haven't collected all the things that I want, the rest, I'll leave them for you. As for the bet that you mentioned earlier with your face, I'm sure you won't fulfill it. Haha, if that's the case, I won't force you. I'll take my leave now. Everyone, the mountains will not change, and the rivers will flow forever. We'll meet again in the pugilistic world. You're still thinking of leaving?" Tung Chongjie had just finished speaking when his eyes suddenly widened in shock. Right in front of him, June Dashao's handsome face was full of mockery and disdain. June Dashao's body slowly faded away and instantly turned into nothingness, completely blending into the air and disappearing. Where is he? Where is he? Everyone released their divine senses to search. With the strength of these people, it was believed that no one in the world could escape so easily. Even the 9 serenities and 14 masters would not be an exception. However, at this moment, they could not find anything. Everyone couldn't help but turn pale with fright. "Xiaoing, use your all-seeing eye immediately to see where this brat is hiding. If we let him escape, just like that, our Heaven Saint Palace will lose a lot of face." Tung Chongjie clenched his teeth and said, "Our Heaven Saint Palace will lose a lot of face. Didn't we lose a lot of face long ago? Do we still need to wait this long?" Xiaoing snorted coldly, her face as cold as frost. She turned around and left. Her heart suddenly felt extremely disappointed. Her heart suddenly turned cold. This was the Heaven Saint Palace that she had stayed in for more than 1,000 years. The legendary place that guarded the Xian continent. Why did it feel so unfamiliar? Although Xiao Ying did not care about leaving, everyone present was a seasoned and experienced person. Immediately, many people spread out in all directions, guarding all the important points. There were even people who went down the mountain, blocking the entrance. As long as June Moxie was still on the mountain, no matter how miraculous his concealment technique was, he would still not be able to escape. Tung Chongjie looked at Xiao Ying's back and said angrily, "Were you so proud of? If Heaven Saint Palace is destroyed, do you think that you will have a good ending?" Xiao Ying heard his words from afar, but did not react at all. Her face only became even colder. She walked into her room without making a sound. At this moment, Mount Heaven Saint was in a complete mess. When Wu Shan came out of seclusion, he almost fainted. But when he heard the entire story, he surprisingly calmed down. He only said one sentence: "If he took it, then let him take it. The more he takes, the better." From then on, there was no further news. It was as if he did not feel the slightest bit of heartache towards the things that June Moxie had taken away. Furthermore, it seemed as if he had heaved a sigh of relief. He finally took it away. This kind of extremely strange reaction caused everyone's eyes to pop out. No one could imagine that their boss, who had always treated these things as his treasures, could be so calm after encountering such an incident. Could it be that he had become muddle-headed from anger? Looking at those few big shots who had also just come out of seclusion, the anger on their faces had also been swept away, turning into extreme calmness. This was really strange. After June Moxie descended from Heaven Saint Mountain, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he went to look at the surrounding mountains, especially the place where the 3 holy lands were. He carefully examined it for a while. Then, He turned around and went up the pillar of Heaven's Peak. The war for seizing the heavens was set up here, so Jun Moxie had to go up and take a look. When he got closer, he discovered that this huge mountain was indeed extremely majestic. Furthermore, the rocks on the mountain were obviously different from other mountain ranges. They actually emitted an extremely unique color, and there was a fluorescent glow within. It was neither stone nor jade, and was extremely hard. Jun Moxie casually picked up a fist-sized rock and tested it in his palm. He could not help but be speechless. The hardness of the rocks on this pillar of Heaven's Peak was far beyond the scope of a normal person's imagination. With his current cultivation, he actually needed to use more than 50% of his spirit energy to crush it, and this was only a small piece of rock that had already been eroded by the wind for God knows how many years. Then it was easy to imagine how hard the rocks on the surface were. Looking into the distance, all the way to the end of the clouds, he actually could not see the peak of the mountain. Furthermore, with just a glance, he could already clearly feel a huge pressure suddenly coming towards him, causing him to involuntarily have a feeling of fear and trepidation. This kind of strange feeling made Jun Moxie feel very strange. This was, after all, only a mountain. Could it be that it had the aura of a first-rate expert? Jun Moxie steeled his heart and floated upwards. With a shocking speed, he climbed upwards as if he was flying. The higher he went, the greater the pressure he felt. He had only ascended to a height of 6,000 to 7,000 meters, but his strength was already somewhat lacking. It was as if there was a deity above, using his unparalleled divine power to prevent humans from ascending to the peak where deities existed. Jun Moxie once again activated his inner yuan and climbed another 5,000 meters. When he looked up, he still could not see the peak. And this position was at least 10,000 meters from the foot of the mountain. Jun Moxie let out a bitter laugh. Even Mount Everest is only around 8,000 meters. This mountain is already 10,000 meters high, but I can only reach the waist of the mountain. This is too abnormal. But at this time, Jun Moxie finally understood why he could see the pillar of Heaven's Peak from thousands of miles away. The rocks on the mountain were not only incomparably hard, but they also seemed to be able to emit light. The light emitted had a magnifying effect. Millions and millions of rocks were piled together, so it created such a strange natural scene. He tried to dive down the mountain, but Jun Moxie discovered something. His yin-yang escape seemed to have lost its magical ability on the pillar of Heaven's Peak. The entire pillar of Heaven's mountains here seemed to be a restrictive magic treasure of some ancient almighty being. This discovery made even Jun Moxie jump in fright. Just who had such a heaven-defying ability? Also, this mountain seemed to be too big. Jun Dashao originally planned to go further up, but he discovered that he could no longer climb up. Jun Moxie let out a sigh. No wonder no one had ever been able to climb over the pillar of Heaven's Peak. So it was like this: there was a limit to one's strength. His strength was still limited, so he could only reach this point. But this secret he must definitely unravel in the future. Turning his head and descending the mountain, Jun Moxie headed north. He had already left Tianxiang City for a long time. Perhaps it was time for him to go back and take a look. The current him no longer had so many restrictions. He did not need to care about anything. And there was also the 7-colored holy fruit, the Misty Mansion. He must definitely go and obtain them. Right now, he could only take one step at a time. When he received news that Xiao Guofeng and the others were still alive, then he would make plans. As Jun Moxie pondered, he took large strides and headed north. Chapter 903. This time, Jun Moxie did not choose to travel on foot. There was a distance of tens of thousands of miles from this mountainous region. Even if he used his fastest movement technique, or if he used Mei Shuiyin, whose movement techniques were better than Jun Moxie's, it would still take him a few days to reach his destination. Jun Dashao's time was very tight, and he could not afford to waste any time. The most important problem was that the war for seizing the heavens was approaching. Although his side and the 3 holy lands were like fire and water, and it was difficult for them to coexist. Although Jun Dashao had said, "The lives of the world have nothing to do with me," more than once, it did not affect Jun Moxie's extreme hatred towards the strange races. There was no reason for this. If he had to explain it, then it could only be due to the indelible indignation from his previous life. Jun Mo Xie hated the so-called strange races for no reason at all, especially those who were conjoined twins, and those disgusting fellows who did that to themselves. So, even if the three holy lands were willing to allow the strange races to enter the Xian continent, Jun Moxie would definitely not allow it. Not only did he have to win the war for seizing the heavens, after the war for seizing the heavens, Jun Moxie also had to kill his way into the strange race's nest and exterminate every single one of these disgusting creatures. When the nest is overturned, there will be no eggs left intact. This was an extremely crazy plan. So, right now, Jun Dashao was fighting for every single second of time. There was less than half a year left. It could be said that it could be triggered at any moment and was extremely urgent. Whether it was the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer or coldly proud Bailey Luo Yun, they raised their strength to protect themselves. But under the premise of self-preservation, they were all preparing for the final goal after the war for seizing the heavens. From Jun Moxie's point of view, the war for seizing the heavens had already turned into a gimmick. Or perhaps it was a convenient tool for some people to gain fame and benefits. It only added countless variables to the continent. The best way was to solve the problem once and for all. What strange races? Exterminate them all. That was the way of the king. Although he wasn't a man with lofty ideals, this time he had to do what he wanted to do the most no matter what. Jun Mo Xie directly entered the state of the yin-yang escape and exerted it to the extreme. He raised his speed to the realm of Godspeed. It took him less than a day to finish the journey that took him several days. He crossed the human world mountain and returned to the mortal world. However, when he returned this time, he was surprised to find that the world had undergone a huge change in just a few days. He had changed so much that he almost didn't recognize him. The entire human world was in a saturated and boiling state. Especially those profound practitioners and martial artists who cultivated profound energy, all of them were talking about something with relish. As far as the eye could see, everyone was beaming with joy and saliva was flying everywhere. The name of the evil monarch that had appeared out of nowhere had shaken the entire Xian continent in just a few days. It was said that this evil monarch had led his subordinates to fight against the strongest experts of the three holy lands, and had actually obtained a complete victory. Not only that, all the experts of the three holy lands, apart from a few lucky fellows, had been completely wiped out. This had caused the three holy lands, who had been high and mighty for tens of thousands of years, to suffer a huge loss. How could this be something that an ordinary person could do? Once this matter was spread out, it instantly spread throughout the world. Right now, this evil monarch had already become the idol of all the Xian cultivators in the world. Jun Moxie retracted the state of yin-yang escape and revealed himself. He slowly walked into the small city and leisurely walked into a restaurant by the side of the road. In these few days, if it wasn't wild animals, it was dry rations. Although Jun Moxie had some skills in cooking and barbecuing, eating like this for a few days was really a little unbearable. Since he had a chance to enjoy it today, he naturally had to eat to his heart's content. This place was only 1,000 li away from his destination, Tianxiang City. To an ordinary person, this distance was extremely far and not something that could be reached in a short period of time. But to Jun Moxie in the state of yin-yang escape, it was only an hour's worth of effort, so he was no longer in a hurry to travel. The most important thing was to satisfy his stomach first. Sharpening the axe would not delay the work of chopping firewood. Striking a proper balance between work and rest was the most important principle. Furthermore, Jun Dashao had already given the order for all the flying-type Xian beasts in Tian Fa to keep an eye out for the whereabouts of the people from the Misty Mansion. It would not be easy to find out. No matter what, it would take some time. The moment he walked into the restaurant, a wave of commotion hit him, causing Jun Moxie to almost somersault. A strange feeling of returning to the human world rose in his heart. Although he had always been used to being alone, he had been wandering around the vast mountains in this period of time. All he could see was the silence of the mountains and forests. Now that he saw the bustling of the human world, he could not help but feel a sense of familiarity. He had just found a seat to sit down when he heard an excited voice from behind him. I have to say, this evil monarch is really too awesome. His opponents are the legendary 3 Holy Lands. Brother, what kind of place are those? Those are the peak existences of the Xian continent. Those are the ultimate existences that no one has been able to surpass in the past 10,000 years. But this ultimate existence was utterly defeated by that evil monarch and was almost completely wiped out. TSK, TSK, TSK. Too ferocious. Truly too ferocious. Another person nodded. That's right, This evil monarch is undoubtedly an incredible character. Brother Liu, since you praise this monarch so much, do you know what this evil monarch looks like? This little brother has heard that this evil monarch is the 3rd young master of the Jun family from Tianxiang City, Jun Moxie. Is that true? That brother Liu first laughed coldly. Then, he used a tone as if he knew the inside story and said proudly, Brother Wang, there's something you don't know. What kind of character is the evil monarch? What kind of character is Jun Moxie? Don't say that Jun Moxie is the evil monarch. That's nothing more than the wild conjecture of a commoner. Comparing the two of them together is a huge insult and blasphemy to the evil monarch. He paused for a moment and harumphed. Brother Wang, we're all good brothers here. If you say these words in front of me, it's not a big deal. I'll pretend that I didn't hear it. But if it's somewhere else, please don't ever say such things again. This is a gossip that can cause you to be killed at any time. If the admirers of the evil monarch hear it, they'll definitely give you a good beating. Even if they kill you right here and now, in the entire world, no one would dare to say a single word. The moment he said that Brother Wang instantly became cautious. Looking around, he shrank his neck and said in a low voice, Many thanks for Brother Liu's reminder. This little brother has indeed misspoken. That Jun Moxie is merely a little brat. How can he be compared to the evil monarch? Brother Wang, these words are well said. The abbreviation of the evil lord is also well used. Throughout the world, only this old man is worthy of the name evil lord, which has the power to rule over the world. Brother Liu expressed his approval. Jun Moxie sat at the side and listened with his mouth agape. Master Dashao had never imagined that his name had already reached the level of intimidating the entire world. Furthermore, in the eyes of others, he'd actually reached the level of that old man. What the hell was this? That was not all. The most ridiculous thing was that this evil monarch couldn't be Jun Moxie. Jun Dashao was truly feeling a little dizzy. Thinking till here, Jun Moxie rubbed his face and turned around. Putting on a friendly smile, he cupped his fists and said, This brother, please. This young master, may I ask what you wish to see? Seeing Jun Moxie's extraordinary bearing, handsome appearance, and noble bearing, the two of them did not dare to tarry and hurriedly cupped their fists to return the greeting. How could I dare to see you? It's just that I heard the two of you talking about the evil monarch and the evil monarch just now, and I'm a little curious in my heart. Therefore, I took the liberty to disturb you. I hope that this brother can help me resolve my doubts. I will be eternally grateful. Jun Moxie said politely. Haha, so it's this matter. Young master has truly asked the right person. This Liu is known as the omnivore of the pugilistic world, and this name was not obtained randomly. With regards to the bloody battle between the evil monarch and the 3 holy lands, this Liu just happens to know quite a bit of inside information. However, when young master spoke about the evil monarch earlier, your words were not respectful enough. As juniors, we should be more respectful towards experts of the older generation, especially a peerless expert like the evil monarch. This brother Liu said with a satisfied smile as he tugged at his mustache that looked like a mouse's tail. Old man? Oh, Looks like this brother knows quite a bit of inside information that no one else knows. June Moxie became even more fervent as he asked excitedly. Then, can you tell me in detail? Air. Cough, cough, cough. This one's throat is a little dry. Furthermore, I'm short on money, and I'm about to run out of wine. Let's talk about it next time. Brother Lou narrowed his eyes and laughed wretchedly. What are you saying, brother? Please help me resolve my doubts. This meal is naturally my treat. Waiter, bring a few more dishes and 2 jugs of good wine. June Moxie waved his hands grandly. However, he was a little depressed in his heart. He wanted to hear some legends about himself, but he actually had to be extorted by someone else. If this matter were to be spread out, how comical would it be? But this fellow said that he knew quite a bit of inside information. Just what kind of inside information was it? Why did he have the titles of senior expert and old man? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.